don't know. To me, it's boring, and the lyrics are really weird. It sounds like it's about an STD, even though it's probably not. But I don't know. To me, it's just not a.
Hey doc, I
I don't
need a pain reliever.
know.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to this 54th episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And on today's episode, we're going to be covering everybody's favorite record, Summer in Paradise. As usual with our album discussion episodes, we're first going to go over some of the history behind the record and talk about how it came together. And then we will discuss each of the tracks one by one and share our own thoughts and opinions on them. And then to close out the episode, we're going to go over a few extra Beach Boys related tracks, including some of Brian Wilson's collaborations with Andy Paley. Joining me tonight, I have my good friends Riley, Matt, and Nate, as well as our special guest, Thomas. Thomas has his own YouTube channel called Sound of Free, where he discusses all things Beach Boys, from album reviews to recent news and stories, and just general discussion about the band. If any of you listening haven't checked out his channel before, I definitely recommend it. I think you'll really enjoy his content. Before we get into some of the history and background surrounding Summer in Paradise, do you guys have any general thoughts or feelings about the record that you wanted to share?
May I start?
Yes, Nate, please.
So I have a bit of a strange analogy, but I was thinking about this today. And I think in life, people across the board tend to take their anger out on certain people or certain things. When people are unhappy with a situation, they'll take their frustration out on something specific. And I think there are a lot of Beach Boys fans who maybe were frustrated or unhappy with the way things went for the band. And I think they take their anger out on this album. I think this album is essentially just the punching bag for people who weren't thrilled about the way things were going for the band in the 90s.
Mhm.
Yet, I think the album has a lot of merit, and I think it's greatly misunderstood. I think technology wise, it was very, very groundbreaking, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But overall, I think it's something that people have a people have a knee-jerk reaction to
Mhm.
be critical of this album. But I find in my case, when I listened to it just with an open mind, and with other people I speak to, when they listen to it with an open mind, you can actually find a lot to enjoy within this album. So I think it's a fun listen.
So in the past, I had been very harsh on this album, saying like there is nothing of merit on it. Having listened to it, I actually think there are some pretty good tracks on here. I know that a lot of the hate from this album definitely comes from the fact that this is like the Mike Love led Beach Boys, and I also think part of it too is there have been some popular videos about this album made online, so that has kind of spread some information, misinformation, whatever about it. I do appreciate that this was recorded on an early version of Pro Tools on a Macintosh Quadra. I'm a big Apple nerd, so that's kind of cool. And I do think there are some very pleasant songs on here. Definitely some pretty good adult contemporary, like 90s cuts. I actually was reading something recently that I think that this album might have fared a bit better if it came out like a year or two earlier, or if they had just pushed different singles. Just because like I think the problem was when this had come out, radio had started getting very heavy with like grunge and R&B and stuff, and it just wasn't really in the wheelhouse. But yeah, I actually think there is some very pleasant material on here, and I think it gets a bad rep for some bad songs that kind of blew up. Admittedly, there are some bad songs on here, and also, like I said, just because of like what it represents, as Nate said. But there is some pleasant material on here, and I actually think the album cover is quite good.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, pretty much what you guys have said. I think that this album gets a very bad rep for about like two songs, and granted, those are probably two of the worst songs in the entire discography, like bar none. Um, and some pretty dated, even dated at the time production. But I've always been a pretty big fan of the Terry Melcher. Well, no, I guess not the biggest fan, but I've always been a fan of the Terry Melcher and Mike Love collaborations. I think there's some pretty well composed material on here, and I'll talk about them when we talk about them. I'm a sucker for one particular song that I know Jake hasn't really quite gotten into yet. There is good songwriting on here, um, in the good songwriting moments, but there's also some bad songwriting on here, and I think it is unfair to give this album that entirely terrible worst album ever made reputation. It's not the worst album ever made. I can think of a couple Beach Boys albums I find worse than this, and I think there's just some pretty shitty music out there. And if this is like what you think is the worst of all time, then you're not really listening hard enough. So yeah, some like meh production on it that probably could have been a lot better. But I think it's a very suitable follow-up for Still Cruising. And I think that there is some good composition on here. So I don't think it's the worst Beach Boys album, and I definitely don't think it's one of the worst of all time because there's some really shitty music out there.
I can think of a couple.
Thomas?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. I've been watching all of your episodes and I love all of your discussions. And it's really an honor to be talking about this underrated album offering by the Beach Boys. And as you guys said, I don't think it's their worst album. And I always personally thought of this Summer in Paradise as sort of Mike Love-led project released under the Beach Boys name, much like Love You or Pet Sounds are Brian's solo albums, so to speak. Not to like compare them to each other, but I'm just saying that because I don't think it's fair to compare Summer in Paradise to something like Sunflower, which is a complete group effort. It's much more fair to, if you want to compare this to something, compare to it to like Mike's solo projects, really. So yeah, I also love the album cover. I think it's super cool, and I think it would deserve a vinyl re-release. I know there's the Korean vinyl out there, but it costs like $2,000. So I don't know who's getting that, but yeah.
Is that an American copy or the UK copy?
It's the US copy.
Very cool. It's hard to find.
Yeah, it cost actually like I think like $1 or something like that. They didn't. It's kind of costly if you want to like get it from online. I think it's costs a lot. I don't know how much these days, but
When I bought it, I think it was about $12, but I know that shipping
okay.
has like exploded in recent years.
Yeah.
It would probably kill you.
Yeah, so in terms of my thoughts on this album, pretty similar to everything that you guys said. This is a record that I honestly think that some people just shit on a little too much, even with all of the flaws that it has. I'll admit that I used to be one of those people myself before I eventually gave the record a real chance a couple of years ago. But over time, I found there to be quite a bit of charm on here. Yes, like you guys said, a lot of the production is pretty crappy sounding. In particular, the drums, which I think really sound like very kind of cheap and also just way too loud in a lot of cases. But you also have to consider that they made this using a very early version of Pro Tools, which it definitely sounds like it. I also will say that musically, I really don't think that this album is that bad. Yes, there are a few stinkers on here, which we'll definitely get to, but I also think that there's some really catchy and memorable pop songs that I think a lot of fans overlook, mostly because they're buried on this album and they're too afraid to listen to it. So I know that a lot of people take issue with the fact that this was a Mike Love and Terry Melcher led album, like you guys said, but I really don't think that you can deny that they wrote some really great hooks together, and there's quite a few of them on here. So yeah, overall, this is far from a great record, and there's definitely a lot that I think could have been improved upon. But honestly, I really enjoyed re-listening to it this week. And at this point, I would say that there's more songs on here that I like than I don't like. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion tonight. All right, so now to get into some of the history behind Summer in Paradise, I'm going to pass things over to Nate. So Nate, do you want to kind of talk about how the album came together and also how it was recorded?
Yeah, so in the early 90s, Mike held a meeting between the band members and the powers that be, so to speak, with a goal to gain permission from everyone involved for Mike to essentially captain the ship for this new album of theirs. And, the band, they all recognized that perhaps their past few albums were maybe democratic to a point of being confused. And I think everyone agreed that the album needed to be cohesive and have a leader. So Mike was the one that wanted to fill that role this time around. And we all know by this point, Mike, in many ways, almost took control of the group. But it has to be said that what led up to this makes that happening seem very logical. So first of all, you have Brian is almost completely out of the picture because of what he was going through with Dr. Landy, which we talked about in many previous episodes, so we don't need to rehash here. Carl, though he wasn't diagnosed with anything, was likely at the beginning of dealing with health issues and not feeling his best. And Alan was he was not fired by any means, but he was suspended from the group around this time because, we all love Al, but according to those who were there and those who know, Al was pretty difficult to deal with at this time. He was butting heads with the other band members. And so really the only one left to really captain the ship at this point was Mike. So Mike goes to Martha's Vineyard with Terry Melcher, and they begin thinking about what this next Beach Boys album should be. And they were there in the summertime, and I think they were on the beach, is the way the story goes. And Mike and Terry were, observing the people having fun on the beach, and the conversation arose. The Beach Boys have made a lot of albums that, are about summer here and there or allude to summer, but we've never done an album where every song relates to this central theme of summer and have a almost concept album about summer. And that was sort of their initial spark. So Mike and Terry wrote down probably 50 of what they considered to be the greatest summer songs that they wanted to cover. And they essentially shaved that list down to the half a dozen cover songs they ended up doing on this album. And then, wrote the bulk of the new originals as a duo. So that's how the album came to be. You had Terry Melcher producing with a lot of assistance from Bruce. They were kind of like this when it came to studio work. You have Carl contributing when he can, but perhaps not as present as he would have been during something like LA. So a lot of the vocals were being filled in by Terry Melcher himself, as well as Adrian Baker, a little bit from Matt Jardine. So there is some sort of surrogate Beach Boy vocals. But nonetheless, towards the end of the process, Al was allowed to come back to the sessions and add his vocals to the album. And by the time the album was completed, it did definitely have that Beach Boy vocal sound. And whatever you can say about the album, the vocals and the harmonies are fantastic. So the album this time around was not released through Capitol. They decided to go with a much smaller independent label. And so they initially released the album in 1992. The singles, Hot Fun in the Summertime, they got airplay on TV, but the album didn't really sell too well. So the band thought, okay, why don't we go back in the studio and edit these songs a little bit, make any changes we deem necessary. So the following year in 1993, they actually released a remixed version of the album, which while it has all the same songs, all the songs are tweaked a little bit. So your listening experience may vary whether you listen to the US version or the UK version. In most instances, it's just mixing changes, but in some instances, they actually rewrote parts of songs, took sections out, added new sections. So the album ultimately didn't sell well. It's in a way almost considered like non-canon in the way that it's not included in their streaming catalog. Although what I've been told is that it's not because the band is embarrassed of the album or anything like that, or it's not that they don't want it to be heard, or it's nothing like that. It's just the rights issue with the fact that this wasn't done through Capitol and this previous label that owns the rights, and it's all a mess. So that's the reason it's not on streaming. But I think we can all hope that that will be corrected. The album deserves to be heard.
Matt, I know you're the kind of the Apple nerd of the group here. Do you want to add anything about kind of Pro Tools and just like, them using an early version of it on this album?
Sure. So, a little bit of backstory here. So, the Macintosh was originally launched in 1984, and it was the first computer that really popularized what is known today as a graphical user interface, or a GUI, to the masses. Apple, the year before, had released the Apple Lisa, which was very expensive. This computer retailed for $10,000 in 1983, so you can imagine how many people bought it. The Mac kind of brought that price point down. And as time went on, the Mac got more and more powerful and more usable. And one of the benefits of the Macintosh, especially with the fact that it was graphical, meant that it had really good audio visual support. There were a lot of cool games written for it. And very early on, people started making microphones and things that you could plug into the Mac. So as technology got better and the computers got more powerful, that led to the development of the digital audio workstations. And Pro Tools in the early 90s became kind of the de facto digital audio workstation for the Macintosh. Now, this was done on a Macintosh Quadra, the Quadra standing for the 68040 processor that was in it, so the 4. And this was the last of Apple's 68K processors before they started switching over to the PowerPC chip, which they started doing in 1994. So I was actually doing a little bit of research on Apple forums, and apparently a setup that they were recording this on probably cost over like $100,000 back in the 90s. So this was a very expensive setup. It was pretty ahead of its time in the way that, they were recording it all digitally. But I guess the downside of that is that it does make the production sound a little bit more dated because it was a beta version of a software. So think about it, they probably hadn't even worked out all the bugs yet on the software they were recording this on. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. Just like I said, as a bit of an Apple nerd, I think that's really cool that they that this album has that association.
Yeah, the fact that they were pioneering digital recording before anyone else was doing that is literally, in my opinion, just as groundbreaking as the tape experimentation they were doing with Good Vibrations and Smile. Like, to me, I see a direct line from the guys that were doing those tape experiments in the 60s to the fact that they were the first practically to use Pro Tools in the 90s.
But it bothers me a little bit when sometimes people dismiss this album sounding bad, because the main problem with that is the only versions that you can listen to it are the official CD, which very few people have, or then that sort of crappy YouTube rip, which,
That's such a good
problem.
point.
Yeah, because I would love it to be on streaming so that you could actually listen to it in high quality, because a lot of people dismiss the way it sounds, which, I know it doesn't correct the issues with the production and, make the bad songs good if you listen to it in high quality. But still, I just wish it was available on streaming so that people could listen to it the way it was meant to be listened to, and not just some, the version that some dude ripped off to YouTube, or I don't know, like where.
That's a good point.
That's a brilliant point. Yeah, how can you judge the production off of something that's a crappy little YouTube rip compared to at least having the CD or hearing it streamed properly? I guess I have one more little thought as an overarching theme.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this was really the album and the era, and you'll sort of have to accept what I'm saying. I'm using it somewhat to refer to a specific event, but somewhat loosely as a term. But I think this album and era, it's why a lot of people hate it, but it's just the truth, is when they really embraced the fact that they were kind of these full house guys, and like instead of like being too cool for school and like not acknowledging that, I think this is the era when they're like, all right, you know what? It is what it is. This is how our new fan base found us. Let's put Uncle Jesse in all of our videos. Let's have him smack dab with his own lead vocal on the album. Let's just make music that's very family oriented and have our music videos be very family oriented. And it's a distinct shift away from the 80s when they were doing the California Dreaming video in the church, trying to be a little more edgy and a little more adult. Then you get to now, and it's like, hey, we're those family guys now. And it's an interesting shift.
I think also too some of that is what was going on in popular music in the early 90s. I know that there's that infamous interview of Mike saying that like we're trying to compete with Michael Jackson's Dangerous, which is what he had just put out. But even if you look at like the rock charts, Nirvana, this is the furthest I could think of from Nirvana,
In the UK,
and
I
the
was
UK
gonna say
too.
the UK, like even though grunge wasn't necessarily like popular over there, like the music scene was drastically different too. It was because the UK would always like support the Beach Boys in these tough times, and even like Wipeout was kind of a hit, like I think in the UK in '87. So, but like no, I mean I'm a sucker for it. You have like the Manchester stuff going on in like '91. You get like the very early stages of Britpop in like '92, and like even though the UK always kind of had the Beach Boys backs at this point in time, they did not. So.
Yeah, I do think it's really worth emphasizing too. Like, and I think Nate, you might have already mentioned it too, but like this sounded really dated at the time. Like, you know, you can like this thing listening to it now, it sounds like you would assume if you didn't have the year it was released, you would assume based on just the production elements from the drums to the synths and stuff, you'd assume, well, this sounds like it probably came out like 85, 86, somewhere around that mid to late 80s period. And then you find out it came out in what, 92? Like this sounded dated at the time, you know. And you know, some people like me, I don't really mind the 80s production sound, so I don't really hold that against it. What I do hold against it is that some of the production elements just sound cheap. And really, for me, the main issue is the drums. I just think that the drums sound especially just really, really crappy on here. But we'll get into that as we go through the songs. So
Yeah. If this was recorded in 85, 86, it probably would have been on like a Commodore or something because the Macintosh just wasn't powerful enough to be doing music stuff like that in the mid 80s.
mhm. All right, are we ready to get into the track by track run through for Summer in Paradise?
Yeah.
All right. So the album opens up with Hot Fun in the Summertime. So this is, of course, a Sly and the Family Stone song from 1969. This was released as the first and only commercial single from the album. It actually did go top 20 on the US Adult Contemporary charts, which honestly kind of makes it pretty much the only thing related to this record that had any sort of real commercial success. In terms of the original Sly Stone version, I think that it's a pretty timeless soul song with some really great vocals and some really nice strings as well. I can definitely see why it's one of the group's most well-known tracks. Judging this Beach Boys cover, though, it clearly sounds a lot more dated than the original, even though it was recorded much later. Like with most of this album, you have the programmed drums as well as the very compressed and echoey production, which I think makes the song almost sound like it came out like 5, 6 years earlier, even though it's actually from the 90s. All that said, though, I have to admit that I do get some enjoyment out of this cover. I think that all the guys give some pretty solid vocals, especially Carl, who I think sounds great. I do always laugh when Carl does the "we can bow bow when we want to." I think that that's really funny. He was probably the only one in the band that could get away with that line. But yeah, honestly, I don't even mind the production on this one that much. I would consider it one of the better sounding recordings on the album. And I think that if they had done a little more fine tuning on it and maybe redone the drums, I think that it could have turned out really great. So overall, this is one of the more enjoyable moments on the record for me. And it's one of the tracks that I do find myself coming back to from time to time, despite its flaws. So solid cover, but I wouldn't say that it compares to the original version by Sly and the Family Stone.
So to me, the album is off to a very strong start with this starting it off. I think the production is really solid. Yes, the drums are loud, but I actually don't even mind the sound of the drums themselves. I'm a fan of a echoey snare drum, but I do think, it's a classic song, so the songwriting is great. I love Mike's lead in the verses and then Carl and Adrian's falsetto vocals. Just great lead vocals, and then the backgrounds are sublime. And it's just everything that I would reasonably expect and want from a early 90s Beach Boys song. These guys were dads at this point, up there on stage wearing shorts and performing for presidents and things like that. So I'm not going to expect them to be making feel flows or it's about time kind of stuff at this stage in their life. So given the stage of life they are in, this is everything I feel like you could expect and want. And it's a great poppy sound, and I can see why it was a hit on adult contemporary radio. And I think the music video that John Stamos directed, yes, it's silly, yes, it's goofy, but it's a lot of fun. So if anyone who's watching hasn't checked out that music video, it's a total hoot, and it's a great little slice of early 90s fluff.
Um, I appreciate the vocals. I think it's an interesting choice of cover, but I don't think that this song works in this style. I think that this works best as like a nice like soul funk song, like when Sly and the Family Stone did it. So I think it's all right for me. I just prefer the original arrangement.
Yeah. The Sly and Family Stone one does kick this one's ass. But I think it's one of those songs that like compositionally it's so strong that it still works. And I think there is not many bands that could cover this like the Beach Boys. I kind of wish they covered it like maybe 10 years earlier. When you have maybe Dennis who can maybe get in the mix or Brian in some capacity. But I do think it works well in the context of the record. And I do think it's a really great choice for an opener. And something I will say with a lot of the songs on this album, it works well, very well as a concept. In execution, though, it falls a little flat. But Carl delivers a hell of a vocal delivery. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, though, if you mix the snare drum down a lot, and lower the volume of it, probably work a lot better. So I do like it. I just kind of wish it was executed a bit better than it was.
I would have really loved to have heard it done in the 70s, like when Blondie and Ricky were in the group.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. When did the song originally come out? Was it like 68,
Um,
69?
yeah.
Yeah, I think they totally could have killed it in the 70s, but I don't think they were unfortunately, they weren't really doing a lot of like these oldies, quote unquote, act things. So I don't think they would have covered a song from the 60s yet.
Well, they were covering Jumpin' Jack Flash back then, so I guess you never
That's
know.
That's true, but that's before Mick Jagger was chicken shit to get on stage with the Beach Boys.
I was just about to
Indeed.
quote that.
Well, I have to admit that I'm not too familiar with the original versions of any of these covers on this album. I've heard them maybe once or twice, but it's been a while. I think this one is a nice opener and it's a decent cover. The vocals are great, but I don't really have anything else to add to that. It's an all right song, a great opener.
Yeah. I don't know if Sly and the Family Stone were that big in Europe. I think they were more of an American band.
Yeah, at least not here, but yeah, I'm not too familiar with them.
Yeah, I think what makes this a good way to open it is that you're starting out with a song that people will recognize, instead of like starting out with a new song, because sometimes those songs don't always go over the best, because you don't know how people are going to react. It's like, well, let's start with something that people are going to recognize and something that we can do kind of a fun, kind of commercial sounding cover of. So I totally understand why this was the opener, and honestly, I can't really imagine most of the other tracks in here opening the album. I think that this was definitely the right choice to open it. So
It's
I
crazy that the Beach Boys, like this, I feel like we can all agree is more or less like the deepest of the deep cuts, a song off Summer in Paradise. Like a song that we consider, or that the band would consider a deep cut, was still a top 20 hit. Like that is so wild.
all right, so the next track on the album is Surfin'. Some fans call it Surfin' 92 because it's a re-recording. So, of course, this song was originally released as the Beach Boys' first single in 1961 and was included on their debut album, Surfin' Safari. I know that I've said before on this podcast that I'm not the biggest fan of Surfin' and that it's a little bit too primitive for me. But I also do think that the original recording has some charm to it, and I do appreciate kind of the historical significance as well. But this re-recording, though, just sounds really goofy and obnoxious to me, and I think it's maybe one of the most dated sounding songs in the entire album. In particular, I think the drums on this song sound absolutely ridiculous and make the whole recording just feel really cheap. I also think that little guitar part in between the verses had some potential, but the guitar just sounds really stale and artificial to me. So it doesn't really work for me either. Really, I feel like this re-recording could have worked out quite a bit better if it had been played a little bit looser and given more of a live sound. But instead, it just really comes off as kind of lifeless and uninspired. And if it weren't for Carl's vocals on this, I don't really think I'd have much positive to say about it. So I agree with the band's idea that Surfin' could use a more fleshed out and updated recording. Like I said, it is a pretty primitive song, so I see why the band wanted to do like another version of it. But this recording just isn't it. I just think that it really lacks energy, and I think that it loses pretty much all of the charm of the original. So for me, this is definitely one of the lowlights of the record, and I can see why a lot of people kind of shit on this one. So not the biggest fan of this one.
To be like 100% honest, this is a arrangement of the song. I do love Surfin' the song. Think it's brilliant and quaint and fun. But this particular version, I have to be in the right mood for it, is what I would say. Like there are plenty of times where if I heard it, I'd be like, skip. It's a little much. Like Jake said, those drums are kind of crazy, a little long. But if I'm in the right mood, if I'm out for a walk and it's sunny out, or if I'm like on a nice car ride and the windows are down and this song comes on, I'm like, you know what? Hell yeah, turn it up. So it's totally circumstantial for me whether I'm enjoying it or not. So yeah, is the arrangement dated? Yes. Do the instruments mostly sound like they were computer generated? I'd say so. But I'll be damned if Carl's vocal doesn't make it absolutely worth listening to and returning to. Because for me, the original version is so cute and quaint to hear him singing as little kids. But to hear Carl owning this with his kind of gritty, more adult voice, just letting it rip, it's fun. And it's kind of interesting to learn that they meant for this to be like a almost a hip hop influenced version of Surfin', which kind of explains like some of the choices. I've heard interviews with Bruce and Mike saying like they were observing all of the rappers that were blowing up at the time, and hip hop was such a new genre relatively, and they were like so fascinated by how hip hop was essentially entirely rhythmically based, and it totally reminded Mike and Bruce about surfing and the doo-wop music, because in a similar way, doo-wop is almost like hip hop's older brother in terms of like making all those rhythms with your vocals. Don't give me that look, Riley. I think about it,
No,
you
I
know?
mean, I think you are right, but I was just thinking of like Mike Love thinking that, and it's like,
I mean, he's
because
probably
Well,
in Mike's mind, he's like, yeah, surfing, but like hip hop.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
I
is
was
it?
putting a lot of Riley thoughts together for a lack of a better term. Like the way my brain functions, I was still thinking about what you're talking about with Mike, and then I heard the hip hop evolution. I'm like, I could totally see Mike thinking that.
Okay, I'm just being goofy. But anyway, so it's an interesting path of ideas for how it came together. And is it a masterpiece? No, but it's like it makes me laugh, it makes me smile. And like I said, if I'm in the right mood, I'll sing along.
So my thoughts. I appreciate the idea of a fleshed out surfing. I think Carl sounds really good on it, but it's dated. It kind of is like adding stuff into the song that doesn't really need to be there. And now that you mention a hip hop surfing, I'm just imagining like Vanilla Ice trying to sing this or something.
Yeah, yeah, that's what my brain was thinking of.
It's like we're talking about like pop rappers that were big, or maybe like MC Hammer with the parachute pants. Um, a nice idea and some nice vocals, but not a patch on the original for me.
Yeah, it exists. I don't think it's like deeply horrendous, but for a song that I already like more appreciated than liked, it's like I something I do appreciate, and that this has more to do with the record than the actual song, is there is a big emphasis on guitar on this record, more than a lot of their previous ones. Minus maybe I don't know, which has the incredible Gary Moore. Um, the past like I would say like almost 20 years, there's been a lack of guitar in their music. And I do appreciate that they're kind of bringing it back in this one, even though it sounds really terrible. Especially on this song.
It's like their most guitar heavy album since Summer Days or something like that.
I don't even think Summer Days is that guitar heavy. I think this is the biggest guitar heavy album since maybe like Surfing USA.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but yeah, this particular, I don't know. I never truly loved the song to begin with. Like I thought it was fine. It's a big important landmark. But I feel like if they were gonna cover one of their own songs, why didn't they do like damn near any other song from like this true surf era? Like maybe not Farmer's Daughter, but like pick something else. I don't know. Give me Stoked. Give me Stoked with the rap over it.
Oh, Lordy.
Like this one's almost like too primitive to almost do much with, you know, like their way
Right.
of adding to it was just adding the little da-na-na in between. But like even that gets old after a while. It's like, well, the song's so basic at its core. It's like, what are we really adding to it? You know?
Yeah, the song is more free like bluegrass like not bluegrass like jug band. It's closer to jug band than it is rock and roll almost. So I mean like in terms of like arrangements. So
Well, like you guys said, the original is super primitive, but I still think that this makes a lot of sense for them to choose this one because it's basically the 30th anniversary in 92 or 91, I guess. And, of surfing. And, well, the surfing is their first recording. It's not really like a beloved classic, even though it's charming, but not a lot of people actually know or remember it or even remembered it in the early 90s. And it's barely a song, so I think it makes sense for them to re-record this one. But the end result, well, I like the idea, but the end result is kind of offensive and not super good, but I still enjoy it a lot. It's super hilarious, it's fun, and I love those "I'm too sexy" drum fills, which are just so obnoxious, but they just don't fail to make me laugh each time I hear them. And that crazy guitar riff too. It's just, I don't know, it's just so crazy and over the top that I always find enjoyment out of this, even though I do admit that it's way too long. It's like almost 2 minutes too long, this version. But it's not objectively good, but I do enjoy it. For me myself, but I wouldn't dare to listen to it when anybody else is around me.
Yes, same here for sure. Yeah.
I've subjected my wife to the entire Summer in Paradise album probably more
Poor
times
woman.
than she cares to admit.
Yeah, I mean, he's a
Yeah,
strong.
Nate. Yeah, Nate. You're probably just like, no, listen to Carl. Listen to Carl.
Yeah, literally.
I promise it'll get good. Just keep listening.
Yeah.
You haven't shown this to Ashley, have you?
What's that? She hasn't heard a damn thing on here. So
Good.
she might be hearing the next one soon. Which is Summer of Love. So of all of the songs in the Beach Boys catalog, I think it's fair to say that this one might be the most infamous among fans. It's pretty much a Mike Love rap song where he's singing about how he can't wait for summer because it's going to be a summer of love, and lists everything that he wants to do with his lover. So if there's one good thing I have to say about this track, it's that I think it's one of the most hilariously stupid things I've ever heard in my life. Every single lyric and moment in this song is ridiculous. You have Mike's lines about taking you on a love vacation, and then how doing it with you would be so very cool. When the guy is literally in his 50s at the time, like, come on, Mike, what are we doing here? And then after the verses, you have that absolutely hilarious vocal effect on the "girls are always ready" part, which just sounds so damn goofy, and it makes me laugh every single time I hear it. And then, of
Robo
course,
Bruce.
yeah, Robo Bruce, exactly.
Girls are always ready.
Girls are always ready. And then, of course, the production on this song is also super cheesy. You have the really cheap sounding programmed drums and the damn record scratch effect during the chorus. It's pretty much like the textbook example of a "it's so bad it's good" song for me. The stupidity of it is why I managed to get any enjoyment out of it. If I do have to say one genuinely positive thing about the song, though, I do think that the "girls are always ready for a summer of love" hook is actually pretty damn catchy. And I almost wish that they had used it on another track instead of this one. So overall, I think "Summer of Love" is just a hilariously dumb song, and it somehow manages to be both a low light of the album and a highlight for me. So nothing on this record or in the band's entire catalog makes me laugh as much as this song does. It's a train wreck, but it's a pretty damn funny train wreck. So I enjoy it. And also the music video is quite the thing to watch too. So
Baywatch tie-in, right?
that's right.
Hell
Yeah, so in my outlook on art, I don't think art necessarily always has to be the most profound or the most intellectual. For me, art should just move you and make you feel something.
Oh,
And
hell no, Nate.
and I have never once before listened to this song without laughing my ass off. Like it's never happened. Anytime the song comes on, I will be giggling like an 8-year-old kid. And is the song intellectual or thought-provoking? No, but it moves me in a silly way that most other music doesn't. And yeah, the rap lyrics are so God, I don't even know what to say. The rap lyrics are so zany and just out of your mind silly. And you just are shocked when you're listening to them that A, Mike Love is rapping them, and B, that they were trying to make it a duet with Bart Simpson is just even more mind-blowing. Uh, but what can I say? Like Jake said, the hook is insanely catchy. If that hook was on a song where the verses were sung, it could have been a hit. It could have been a hit song, and I will die on that hill because that chorus just stays in your head. If you hear the song at the beginning of your day, that chorus will still be stuck in your head at the end of the day. So yeah, is it objectively maybe one of the worst songs I've ever heard? Sure. But it makes me feel something and it makes me smile and it makes me laugh. And at the end of the day, art that can do that is more effective than art that just makes you want to skip the song. So kudos to Mike and Terry and the guys for making something that will always bring a smile to my face, no matter what mood I'm in.
Matt.
So I'll start with the positives. I do think that the chorus and the hook, "the girls are always ready," is really catchy. This song, when people say this whole album sucks, this is the song they're talking about. This is the song that became the meme. This is the song that people use to smear the whole record. I have seen Discogs reviews that say the Beach Boys rap on this one. Just warn you, it's embarrassing. It really is. Like, yes, it's unintentionally hilarious, but it's absolutely embarrassing. Like, it really gave the whole record a bad name. The music video is just silly. Like, I get it's funny, but it's like, if people see this and, like, this is where, like, they get the reputation of Mike Love is awful because of this. It's just a joke. It's a joke, and it's a bit of a shame because I think it was a really good hook that was wasted on a pretty crappy song.
Agreed. You could see Terry Melcher's like big contribution. Mike's probably like, Terry, you're writing this new song. And then Terry's writing this incredible like chord progression hook. And then Mike just raps over it. So I think that hook is absolutely incredible. And I think it could have been used on something really cool. Maybe like an upbeat rocker or something. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, man, this song sure does exist, and it is the one digital streaming representation of the album. So you could have picked any song on the record to put on streaming with Baywatch, and you picked this one. I also love the music video where Brian Wilson's dressed in all black for the funeral of the Beach Boys. Um,
He does not look happy in that video.
And Carl had this.
Brian's like, I could do better, and he did. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh, he rapped too. So
And Carl
yeah,
had
but
this
I think that one
song.
has some charm to it. But maybe I'm just a little bit biased. I I mean I objectively I don't I've always said Mike has had a really good way of using vocal cadence to like draw you into a song. I've always thought he's had like good like vocal rhythm. This is not one of those examples. I just like on a song like Surfin' USA, like the way he like the cadence of what he says when he says the words, it like it's integral to the song. It's part of like the general like rhythm to it. And with this, it's just horny. Like
life in prison
I
as lady.
incredible quote. I don't know. I think he's a very talented guy. Even in his 50s, I think he's giving some pretty good vocal deliveries. I think he's giving some of the best vocal performances of like not his entire life, but of like maybe the last 30 years, not 30 years, 10 years of Beach Boys history on this album. And he does this. I don't know. It just exists. It's there. My actually funny story. When I was doing my radio show, last episode of the semester, this was in either April or May, I decided to randomly play Summer of Love just for fun. I was talking about the Beach Boys with my friend Miles. I was like, the Beach Boys did a rap song? He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah. Um, and I played him Summer of Love. And he's like, I kind of liked it. It's what I'd expect from a Beach Boys rap song. I'm like, does that mean you have to like it? He's like, no, but I did. So I thought I'd
I,
throw that out there.
I remember that. That was funny. He seems like a really cool guy to hang out with.
He is.
Well, yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's just once again a hilarious over the top track. It's not objectively good, but it just always makes me laugh because, I mean, how can you not laugh with this? Whether it's unintentional or intentional, I don't know, but it's just hilarious. And for me personally, the worst kind of songs are the songs that are just unmemorable or dull. And this one is just not dull. You can say a lot of things about it, but it's not dull. And, it might always almost have a factor there because, well, let me put that in a different way. Well, I used to be, as a kid, a huge Baywatch fan. I don't remember seeing the episode where Beach Boys were or where this song was, but that might also have a factor with me actually enjoying this song. So it's way too long once again, but it's hilarious. So that's one reason to like it. And yeah, it's objectively super bad, but personally I enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I enjoy it a hell of a lot more than Wipeout. So
I
not
have a
to
friend who's
but
in the entertainment industry, and he said that getting on Baywatch in the 90s, you may have well been on the Super Bowl. Like their viewership was insane and was international. So it's actually a big event for them to have gotten on there, in terms of the eyeballs that saw. And one thing that occurred to me is this song may have actually somehow been influential, if maybe just on one person. But in 1991 or so, the Beach Boys are singing some summer, summer of love, going out looking for love. Over 30 years later, you've got Mike's son Christian singing in the some summer, did it all last summer. So that some summer did find its way to work itself back around 30 years later somehow.
The next track on Summer in Paradise is Island Fever, which is a Mike and Terry Melcher composition. So I know that this is one of the songs on the album that people sometimes call a Kokomo rewrite, which I guess that I can kind of hear a little bit of that in the tropical sound and lyrics. But honestly, I do find this to be different enough musically where it does stand on its own for me. I know Riley has said before that he likes this song quite a bit, and re-listening to it today, I have to admit that I dig it quite a bit too. And honestly, I think that it's grown on me even more since the last time that I heard it. Is it a masterpiece? No. But I do think that it has a pretty strong melody, and I actually really love the guitar playing throughout the song as well, particularly the steel guitar. I think that it adds a lot to the recording, and it makes it almost sound a little more like longing and moving to me. And then lastly, I'll also say that the production on this song, honestly sounds pretty good to me. I genuinely do like the vocal arrangements and instrumentation on here. And even the drums don't sound near as obnoxious on this one as they do on other songs. So yeah, this is a track that I've always kind of had a soft spot for. But re-listening to it this week, I honestly could see myself coming back to it a lot more. Again, it's no masterpiece, but given the album that it's on, it really doesn't need to be. I think that it's a pretty catchy and enjoyable pop song with some really nice guitar playing. So definitely one of the stronger tracks in the album for me. Although I will say I do strongly prefer the US mix. I think that the UK mix sounds a little too stripped back for me. And I think that
They took out the chorus. They took out
well,
the whole.
and then they also replaced some of Carl's parts with Al, which I definitely prefer hearing Carl on here. So, yeah, this song's kind of a bop. I got to admit, as cheesy as it is, and in my head, I was singing the melody to myself before we started recording. And I was like, "Holy shit, I'm singing freaking Island Fever right now." So,
So even though I gave some praise and some kind words to each of the first three songs, I will say that the beginning of this record is like a jerky roller coaster. And the album starts and you're like, okay, R&B with Hot Fun in the Summertime. Whoa, just kidding. It's surfing. It's hair metal riffs. Whoa, just kidding. It's hip hop with Summer of Love. And you're like, whoa, what is the genre? What's going on right now? And finally, when you get to this Island Fever, the the album sort of balances out and finds its pace and finds its tone and its center of gravity, so to speak. And to me, this is really like when I can just ease into the album and actually enjoy it. A lot of the times when I listen to this record, I'll just start with Island Fever and go from there. Because like I said, the first few tracks are just so herky jerky and you literally get whiplash from like the different styles. But yeah, once you get to Island Fever, it's kind of this smooth sailing, kind of consistent, tropical, laid back kind of sound. And yeah, I really love this song, particularly like Jake said, the US version stands out to me. There's nothing I'd really change. Is it a top tier Beach Boys song? Not for me, but is it totally pleasant and worthy of, in my opinion, being a single, worthy of being a successor to Kokomo? Totally. It's exactly where you picture them going after the last few records. So yeah, I quite enjoy it. Terry Melcher's voice is really prominent on this one, so it's kind of cool to hear him blending with the other boys. And yeah, I'd say the song isn't necessarily super memorable at first. Like I don't remember this one as jumping out to me compared to some of the other ones on the album upon like the first time I listened to it. But it's one of the songs that grew on me the most, if that makes sense. It was one of the less exciting at first, but one of the more enjoyable after like spending years listening to the album.
Very catchy. I really like this song. I actually think the production suits this one really well. It actually like the kind of some quote unquote primitive, quadra production actually fits this very well. Love the guitar part you mentioned. I like the Island Fever. The vocals are really good on it. The chorus is really catchy. I actually, I've kind of gone back and forth with like the throwbacks to old songs, but I actually kind of like the "Come On Baby, Wouldn't It Be Nice If I Could Take You Down to Paradise." Very, very catchy song. Carl sounds great on it. Mike gives a really good vocal. Production works really well. I really enjoy it. I think it's a bop. Like you said, Jake. Very fun song.
Oh yeah.
Man, I like this song since the second I listened to it. I think it gets that Kokomo ripoff kind of, I guess, labeling from Mike himself. He said in the liner notes of the excuse me, it has to happen every episode. He said in the liner notes of the record, or I guess of the CD, not the record. It was Kokomo's cousin, and that label just kind of stuck. My light just turned off.
The sign.
Yeah, I guess that Kokomo ripoff from like Mike himself in the liner notes, he literally called it the cousin of Kokomo. And like with the first 5 seconds, you kind of hear it. But after that, the song's just pure hook. Um, it doesn't have a dull moment. Lots of great vocal deliveries. I do love that "Come On Baby, Wouldn't It Be Nice If I Could Take You Down to Paradise." And then you get the sweet, sweet guitar lick. And I love the island. It's just pure hook. And I think it's one of the best Terry Melcher, Mike Love co-writes. I would maybe put it up there with Get You Back. Dude, if you drop this on Still Cruising, I think Still Cruising would jump like 6 spots ahead of my album ranking. So like this is like what I want from Mike Love's ideal summer concept album.
Yeah.
More of these, because I think this song absolutely rips.
Replace Island Girl with this.
No,
Yes.
I still like Island Girl.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'm just gonna say this about Island Girl real quick. Like after you mentioned The Tide Is High, I listened to that song probably like 30 times.
Oh yeah.
I love that song, The Tide Is High.
Yeah. Thomas.
Well, I always mix this with Island Girl.
Oh.
To me, they're just, I don't know, so similar in some ways. But anyway, not a big fan of this one. I prefer the US version because the UK version is really weird because they take out the best part of the track. I don't really know what's going on with that one. It's just a mess. But I'm not sure why I don't like it because it's probably objectively the best track on the album, like from the start. If you compare this to the first three, yeah, it's probably better than those. But I don't know. To me, it's boring, and the lyrics are really weird. It sounds like it's about an STD, even though it's probably not. But I don't know. To me, it's just not a.
Hey doc, I
don't
need
know.
a pain reliever.
I don't get back to this song a lot. I don't know. I usually skip it, but it's all right.
Thanks for that, Thomas. Now I'm never going to hear this the same.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, but like you guys said though, yeah, like the whole thing, I feel like there's like so many hooks in here. I do love that. Yeah. Hey doc, I need a pain reliever. And honestly, I think kind of like Riley said too, I feel like it really gets the Kokomo reputation too from like the fact that it's like that intro section where it kind of sounds like, like Aruba, Jamaica, and then this one it's like, did you ever get the so like they're obviously kind of going for that, but once it gets going, it's its own thing.
Doesn't really go back to it either.
Right, it doesn't. And you know what's funny too, it honestly, I know Nate, you've talked about how like Kokomo kind of has like a melancholy to it underneath like kind of the happiness of the song, and this one kind of does too, like with the kind of like production flourishes with the guitar and stuff. Like there
Yeah, a
is
lot of minor chords too, and sort of
right,
a haunting element.
I think that's why it works for me is because like it's not just a like totally just like, oh, this is a happy song. Like there is something underneath it, So all right, so the next track on the album is Still Surfin', and this
What
is
a classic.
I knew you were gonna get
Classic.
this is another Mike and Terry Melcher composition. So this is another song that I remember actually liking quite a bit the first time that I heard it a few years ago. Like Island Fever, I think that it has a pretty good melody and some nice vocals during the chorus. But unlike that song, I do think that the production on this one does hold it back a bit. Yet again, the drums are the main culprit. I think that they just sound really cheap and artificial, and I wish that the band had just recorded the entire album with real drums instead of these like drum machines, because I just think that it would have improved a lot of these songs. Also, I wanted to ask Riley and Nate about this because you guys are kind of the musicians of the group. I saw somebody in the YouTube comments on this album say that the chord progression on this song was pretty similar to Please Let Me Wonder. And I was wondering if there's any truth to that, but I feel like listening to them both back to back, I can definitely hear it. So I was just wondering if there's any similarity.
They're both in the key of F.
It's kind of like the same way that like a lot of like doo-wop songs kind of have the same chord progression. Like,
Gotcha.
yeah, if you strip away the vocals, it'll sound similar. but you add the vocals and the way the vocals are delivered,
Mhm.
the vocal melody, the cadence of the vocal, it ultimately still is a different song. So
Oh, absolutely. I just when I saw
And
the observation, I'm like, I'm gonna re-listen to them both, and I was like, yeah, I can kind of hear it. So,
they both, Please Let Me Wonder goes from F to F7 to B flat, and this one also goes from F to F7 to B flat. So
yeah.
the chords are very similar.
But yeah, overall, I think that this is a pretty solid song, and it's another one of the more enjoyable tracks on the album for me. I probably wouldn't say it's a classic like Mike seems to consider it, but I do think that it's a fun song. So, and I also wanted to mention, for some reason, I always laugh at the when he says "Surfer Joe." I don't know why I find that funny, but I just do. It's just like just his vocal delivery on that is just goofy. So,
Um, this is the first song on this album for me that I actually get the feeling like, okay, this is classic Beach Boys kind of songwriting and melody and theme. Like to me, this one checks all the boxes of what I consider to be like when the Beach Boys are like firing on all cylinders. To me, it's got a lot of what I like about Somewhere Near Japan and Still Cruising, where it's obviously like playing into the surf theme and the summer theme, but there's still something a little bit adult about it and a little we'll probably keep returning to this, but a little melancholic and a little reflective. And I think it's a total stroke of brilliance that they did a song about whatever happened to Surfer Joe. So, for those who don't know, one of the bands that the Beach Boys played with on stage all the time in their early days in the early 60s was the Surfaris, and their Surfaris opened for the Beach Boys all the time, and they put out a record in the early 60s, Surfer Joe backed with Wipeout, and lo and behold, the DJs preferred Wipeout, and Wipeout became the big hit.
mm.
But nonetheless, Surfer Joe became quite well known as well. And so their song Surfer Joe is almost like a comedy spoken word kind of track, all about this surfer. And so that became like a beloved song, particularly in Southern California. So for the Beach Boys, when they were, all grown up, to make a song about whatever happened to Surfer Joe, I think is a great idea, a classic, tip of the hat to their friends in the Surfaris. So yeah, I love this song. I think the melody is really haunting. The melody is what made me fall in love with the song first. And then I love the backing vocals as well that pay a very clear homage to Get You Back and pull from some of those melodies. And then finally, once I dissected the chords for an old chord video that I did on Mike Gaudette's channel, I realized like, oh shit, this song is not only catchy and good lyrics, but it's very musically sophisticated with a lot of chromaticism and subtle key changes. So yeah, it's just a really brilliant tune in my opinion. And it's one that I constantly revisit because it's got that perfect blend that the Beach Boys perfected of bridging happiness and summer and harmony with something kind of moody and nostalgic and melancholic.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good song too. Pretty catchy. It's got some good vocals on it. Got a pretty catchy hook. And I kind of like what you mentioned, Nate, about like the part about Surfer Joe. That kind of reminds me of, the song Mrs. Robinson, like Where Have You Gone, Joe DiMaggio, Our Nation Turns Out Lonely ITU. Um, Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And also like just kind of like looking through the lyrics, like I kind of see this almost as like someone that's like kind of like trying to like kind of like trace their youth in a little bit. If that makes sense, because it's like talking about like he didn't do much with his law degree. They thought about a major oceanology. It's just like kind of like, like you're just trying to like roll back the clock in a way and trying to like go back to like things that made you happy when you were younger. So yeah, very, very nice tune. I like it a lot.
He's having a midlife crisis, man.
Yeah, pretty much,
Like
but
I'm still surfing. I'm still doing.
it's a little bit more tasteful than just, oh, I bought a Corvette and drove it.
I'm still a ladies' man.
It's done very tastefully though. It's done very tastefully. But yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought of like Mrs. Robinson with that line.
Yeah, usually I'm not a big fan of them like referencing the past as I've seen with like California Calling and on some similar songs to that, maybe off like Keeping the Summer Alive. But I think I really like the way they did it with this one, where like most of the other songs are like, remember when we did California Girls? That was pretty good, right? And this is kind of like a not necessarily like a sad reflection. It's like a
Adult.
slightly melancholic, like nostalgic reflection. And it's like not the evil twin to Still Cruising, but like the depressed twin to Still Cruising, where
And it's
like
interesting that it's not we're still surfing, but he's still surfing. Gives it a whole different connotation.
right. And also it certainly helps that the chord progression is brilliant. I know it maybe rips a little bit on Please Let Me Wonder, but it's still its own song. And I really like the he's still surfing. It's probably Adrian Baker, unfortunately.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think he does do a good job. I just think he's a little annoying. Um, yeah, I just think the song it's got a lot of charm to it, and I think Mike delivers a great vocal. And I love the harmonies on it. I love how there's a little bit of guitar in there, which is again something you haven't really seen too much of. It goes on a little too long. I think it probably could shave like 20 seconds, but I don't think it's that much of a detriment to it. And I think that if there again, same with Island Fever, this is the stuff I think that Mike should have done more of rather than Summer of Love. Um, and you get a couple more songs like this because I think him and Terry were a pretty good songwriting team. I just kind of wish maybe they put a little bit more time into it. That's a conversation for another day on what I would change about this album. But I think this is definitely one of the highlights, and it's very tastefully done.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it's one of the very few real highlights of the album, and especially the chorus is super gorgeous. And the lyrics are maybe I like the idea behind the lyrics and the story, but I don't know, some parts of the lyrics are a bit. I think could have used a little bit of rewriting, but otherwise, I think it's a great tune, an overlooked tune, very underrated, and love it.
All right, the next track on Summer in Paradise is Slow Summer Dancin', One Summer Night. So this one's kind of interesting because it's actually a combination of two songs. The track One Summer Night, which was an old doo-wop song by the Dan Lears, and a new Bruce song called Slow Summer Dancin'. So this is one of those songs that I remember the first couple times that I heard it, it didn't do too much for me, and I kind of thought it was just a generic kind of like power ballad. But re-listening this week, it's honestly grown on me a lot. Production wise, I do think it sounds pretty dated in the same way that some of Bruce's other ballads from around this time sound. But there are enough elements here that I like that I could see myself coming back to this one. Musically, I actually think that this is pretty damn good. I think that Bruce's song blends really well with the section of One Summer Night that they used. And I also do like some of the production touches on here, like that twinkly keyboard sound that plays during the verses, and also the blend of saxophone and synth during the outro of the song. I think that that sounds pretty cool. I also really love Al's lead vocals during the chorus, and I think that it was a really good decision to have him sing that part. It just really suits his voice well. But yeah, overall, I'd consider this song to be kind of the pleasant surprise of the album for me after re-listening. I already did have a few favorites going into this that I've always liked on this album, but I was not expecting to enjoy this one near as much as I did. So I think it's a pretty moving ballad, and it's a nice way for Bruce to kind of close out his songwriting contributions with the band. So I really like this one a lot. I think it's a nice ballad.
So you guys know that I tend to give Bruce so much praise, even on songs that a lot of people knock, I will stick up for. And usually it's because of the sophistication of what Bruce is doing harmonically with the chords. And this is one song where I almost hear more of I hear chord theory and I hear musical exercises more than I'm hearing like a moving song. Like when I'm listening to it, I think like, oh, that was a cool seventh chord. That was a cool bass note to go to. I like why he did that chord change, but it's not necessarily moving me in the same way that Disney Girls or Don't Run Away would. But with that said, when I was getting into this album, this was one that I really loved at first, and then one that I cooled on a bit down the road. And what I'd say about it now is in part of me would prefer to hear either an entire One Summer Night cover or for Bruce to have written an original chorus for this because sometimes it sounds a little jerky to me and just like two incomplete thoughts kind of married together. But in a way, I'll say at the same time, to me, that's almost a homage to Smile and Good Vibrations and like splicing together different pieces of music and making it work. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what Bruce had in mind, but just to draw a parallel and to look at it almost in like a how like a researcher would like, oh, okay, here's another case of them combining songs that are in different keys and different pieces of music and blending them. So in that way, I can appreciate it. I guess maybe just based on the way you guys are hearing me describe it, you could probably tell that I appreciate it, but it doesn't uh light up my world in the way that a lot of Bruce's other songs do.
So for me, surprisingly for me, I actually quite like this song a bit. I know that I'm kind of hit or miss with Bruce. This one I actually do kind of like. I think there's like kind of like there's a nice earnestness to it. The drums are too loud. That's one problem with the drums are mixed way too loud. But I do think there's a good like I actually didn't even know this was a sample, so like that I should just learn that now. But like I think that there's a good that they blend well together, like the original piece with the sample to the point that they form a good cohesive unit. Some really nice vocals from Al on here, and also I really like the sax part. I think that actually works very well in this song.
I
I
did, yeah.
think it's the sax. I just the only thing is I think the drums are just mixed a bit too loud. They don't need to be that loud on this song. But yeah, I actually quite enjoy this one, which is kind of surprising for me because I'm very, hot and cold with Bruce. Some songs I really like, some songs like Easter Bunny and Santa Claus is too much syrup, but this one I actually like quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think
Matt, some
Bruce is
people,
hot and cold with Bruce as well.
yeah. Matt, I think there's some people that agree with you on that about the drums because the most liked comment on the YouTube video for this song was, "You could hear these drums from fucking space."
Yeah, they're just so loud. It's like, did they just like go on the Mac and just whoop it up? I don't know. It
Well,
sounds
it's like the snare sound. It's just like so aggressive. Like once the song gets going, I kind of stop paying attention to it. But like at the start, it's like, oh my God, like tone it down a little bit.
that's
Jesus.
probably what they fixed out of the beta. This is the beta, so the beta had the snare too loud. Then once they were like they ran it through tests, like, okay, we're gonna turn this down.
Yeah, right.
I'm really conflicted on this one because I do enjoy the verses, despite that little descending like arpeggio that's going on. That's like a very Bruce thing to put into a song. Um, yeah, but I think he gives a very tender vocal. I think he uses his voice right. Um, and I'm a big fan of the chorus, but he didn't write the chorus. And that really, in many ways, I do like the song. I'll get that out of the way. I do like it. More than Tears in the Morning. I think that might be I know. Um, yeah, I know. I prefer this to That You're Gosh Darn Sure of. Um,
Now I've got tears in the evening. Unbelievable.
yeah, I know. I'm just a sucker for the chord progression. Um, but man, those drums suck. Also, I am a little bit conflicted though, because this is like if I wrote like a verse or whatever, a verse melody, and then I took "Don't worry, baby, don't worry," and just added that into the song. Like it works. I like it. I don't know. I'm just it's just kind of weird. I can't not know that about the song. I can't listen to the song and then not piece together. When I first heard it, I was like, "Oh, this is incredible! Great song by Bruce." And then I look at the songwriting credits. I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I can't like unsee that kind of thing. But I still think it's good. Good song. And again, kind of shows that this album has a lot going for it. It's just you got a couple of anchors weighing down the summer of love.
Well, I think that's actually quite a bit of a talent to be able to. I mean, I understand it's just a sample, but to piece together a song so well like that. But actually, now that you mentioned "Don't Worry, Baby," that just makes me think of the song "Just Like Starting Over," the Lennon song.
Yeah.
I was also thinking "Push It" by Garbage.
Yeah, that one I know that's a direct sample, but there's a piece of "Just Like Starting Over" where it kind of sounds a little bit like "Don't Worry About That." What when I see you, darling? Like it sounds a little bit like "Don't Worry, Baby."
Oh man, don't ruin that song for me. Maybe my favorite Lennon song, period.
It's a great song. I've been listening to it on repeat a lot lately.
Well, yeah, I've always liked this song a lot. It's been actually one of my favorite Bruce Johnston songs released under the Beach Boys name. But I'm a bit shaken up because I never knew that the chorus was actually taken from another tune. So it does change the perception of what I think about it. I'm not sure yet how it will change it, but it's news to me. So thanks for letting me know that. But yeah, I think the composition is great. The performance is great. Especially love Al's vocals, especially at the tag. That super beautiful part that I love. That I can't sing, but that last part, that's just super beautiful. But yeah, this snare drum is it's trying its best to destroy the whole tune. It's very obnoxious, especially like listening to those tender vocals and like we fell in love, and then there's that like it sounds like a gunshot. It's really strange why they decided to do it that way or mix it that way. So yeah, it really needs some remixing, but otherwise I like the tune.
Desperately.
Yeah,
Yeah, the drum fill at the beginning does sound like a shootout.
yeah, it's like some sort of Counter-Strike sound effect. It's
Yeah.
really weird. But otherwise, I love the tune.
I'm actually wondering now, could they actually remix this? They'd probably have to get a really old computer and see if the files are
Yeah,
salvageable.
that might be
They
really hard.
they're having trouble even finding the files to begin with. That's a big reason why it hasn't been remixed already.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, a Summer in Paradise remix would be
there's
insane.
a lot of
That would sell.
there's a lot of data loss, and especially on those old Macs, it's all scuzzy and stuff that they don't use anymore. So you really have to jump through a million hoops. It's possible though. There's a big community of like new old stuff for these old computers. So if they could ever find it, they might be able to salvage it. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, I guess my defense of it using, part of an older song is that it's not the most obvious choice of song. Like I wasn't really even really that familiar with that song. I mean, I assume it was a hit and stuff, but like, I don't think they could have picked something that was more obvious than that, I think. And also, I think kind of like Matt said, I think it does take a talent to blend two songs together pretty effortlessly. And I think the fact that a couple of you guys didn't even realize that it was two songs, I think kind of speaks to, it's a good blend. And I did know that listening to it. And I was like, I think he did a good job of blending the two. And, I will say, like, I think the production definitely is helping carry this one for me. Like I said, there's like different elements of the production, like during the verses with that keyboard effect and stuff, that does definitely elevate the song a bit for me. But compositionally, I think it's a pretty solid ballad. I don't see it as like anything different than like a lot of Bruce's other ballads from around this time. And I mean, like on "She Believes in Love Again," you have Bruce sharing the chorus with Carl. So on this one, it's with Al. So
And Bruce plays those piano parts on this song, and that actually makes him the only official member of the Beach Boys to play an instrument on this album. Otherwise, they were all just singing, but Bruce
yeah,
added some keys.
yeah, I didn't realize that until I was researching for this episode, and I was like, oh my god, so like Carl doesn't even play a damn note on here. He's just singing. Wow.
Yeah.
All right, the next song on the album is "Strange Things Happen," which is yet another Mike and Terry Melcher composition. So this is one of those songs that I was referring to when I said that I had some favorites before re-listening to this album. I think that this is easily one of the highlights of the record, and it's also one of the most memorable songs that the band did after Kokomo, in my opinion. I think that this has a super catchy melody, some pretty cool lyrics from Mike during the verses, and a really amazing vocal from Al during the chorus. The "Every time I touch my baby, strange things happen to me." That's like such a good chorus. I also saw somebody say that they really love the soundscape of this song, and I totally agree with that. I really like the way that the guitars sound throughout this track, especially during that little acoustic part in the middle of the song. And I also really like the backing vocals during the chorus as well. Again, my only real gripe with this song is the damn drums. But once it gets past the intro, I don't really notice them as much. So thankfully, it doesn't really impact my enjoyment of the song overall. I will also say that I do prefer the UK version of this track because it cuts off most of that instrumental section at the end. I do think that the US recording does outstay its welcome a little bit and didn't need to be nearly 5 minutes long. So, but that's just a small complaint. So overall, really like Strange Things Happen a lot. And if there's one or two tracks on this album that I think that a casual listener might actually enjoy, this is definitely one of them. So I think this is a great effort from Mike and Terry Melcher.
Yeah, I think in every way this song is brilliant and stunning. And to me, this is actually one of the songs on the album where the big loud drums actually enhance the production instead of detracting from it. I think on the previous song, for example, those really loud drums are so out of place. But on this song, which has all the rock guitars and kind of a wall of sound thing going on, the big drums work really well in that context. And this song, uh, I just marvel at it. I think the verse is cool and has this mysterious vibe, and you're sort of pulled in with Mike's soft singing and the kind of minor melody. And then, oh, do I hear?
Riley,
I, I I think I do hear what I think.
What?
your mic is on. We can hear whatever you're listening to.
Yeah,
I was double checking the next song. Oh my
yeah, it
God. My
sounded like
fault.
yeah, that's what I thought it was. So,
That shows you how loud the snares are, man.
oh no, it wasn't the snare I heard.
I
Remember.
Um, sorry, I lost
had
my
to
train of
properly
thought.
hate on it.
Yeah, I marvel at the song because it starts with that really intriguing verse that sort of pulls you in and piques your curiosity. And then you get to the chorus where everything just explodes and sounds so huge and larger than life. And Al's vocal is just classic Al Jardine, one of my all-time favorite Al vocals. I love that there's a bit of rasp in his voice, and he just really lets it rip, and it sounds very soulful and very heartfelt. So I just really, really enjoy this song. And furthermore, I'd consider it, if I had to create some sort of list where I said like the essential Beach Boys tracks that one must listen to, I maybe wouldn't include it on my top 10, my top 20 per se, but on a list much bigger than that, I think I would definitely include this song because musically, I think it's very moving and just really captivating. And even lyrically, I think it's really intriguing and sort of takes you on a bit of a journey. So I think it's really neat. And I wish they would have done some more songs like this where, Mike can even work a little bit of his meditation stuff in, like he does on this song, but just sort of returning to some of those more like mystical, supernatural kind of themes instead of all just things that are straightforward summer songs. I do like the Beach Boys had that otherworldly aspect to some of their songs, like All This Is That, and I Know There's an Answer. There's a sort of spiritual,
Funky pretty.
fantasy, yeah, funky, pretty element to a lot of their songs. So I do like them returning to that, to something that involves a bit of fantasy and imagination to it. So yeah, I love this song.
I guess you could say they could go for like a mystical, magical song. Yes, I know, blah blah blah. He sucks. Anyway, moving on. Strange things happen. First of all,
Shut up, Matt.
I don't know. I deserve that for that. This song, absolutely amazing. I think it should have been a single. I think it's extremely catchy. I like the lyrics. They kind of give me funky, pretty vibes. That's you mentioned that, Nate and Jake. That's actually the one that came to mind with me with some of the lyrics. Al sings the hell out of that fucking chorus, man. I actually like the instrumental part. It kind of gives me like almost like Champagne Supernova vibes or something, where it's kind of like you have like all these instruments going, and it kind of gives you like a little bit of like, kind of like with like the lyrics and everything. I really, really like this song a lot, and I really think this should have been a single. I think it's a bit of a shame that it wasn't a single. I think that this had some definitely some commercial potential, at least on like adult contemporary soft rock stations. And I think it's a bit of a shame that this song is so overlooked because of like, like I said, that this album kind of has a bad rep, but this is a great song. I mean, there are people that I go on the Todd and the Shadow subreddit and they say this whole album is garbage and there's nothing good and blah blah blah. And it's like you're sleeping on a great song here. I really, really, really like this song a lot. Probably one of my favorite from this era of the band.
It shows they could still rock a bit too. Like it could have even been like a rock station staple.
Yeah.
Got the power chords and those sort of soaring lead melodies.
Absolutely. Like this could have fit right in with things like, like Everything I Do It For You and songs like that that were really big in the early 90s.
Something I noticed looking at the my copy. This is Terry's name is put first before Mike's.
Mm.
Also see that on the other highly Beach Boys band acclaimed song from this record, which I think is pretty interesting. I don't know what that means. For all we know, it just Terry's like, just put my name first on this one. Yeah, this one fucking rocks. I love Mike's verse, vocal. Mike is actually killing it with vocals on this one, except for Summer of Love. Um, he's killing it on vocals with this on this album. I think he does a great job. But Al Jardine steals the show. I'm so glad. I don't think anybody really could have pulled this off. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Carl probably could have, but I don't think it would have been the same. I think Al just has a certain
Rasp. Got that.
raspiness. Yes. He has a certain raspiness to his voice that just makes this one pop. And yeah, that instrumental section is actually pretty damn cool. Love the guitar on this one. I love the focus of the guitar on this album, and I think it's used wisely on this one. I love the use of acoustic guitar on this record too. I think that's also a little understated too. Kind of adds to that, yeah, Jimmy Buffett Island like yacht rock vibe. But I think if there is a band to do that in this period of time, I think the Beach Boys could kill it. And I just think that this song is definitely a standout from the record and deserves a listen from any Beach Boys fan. The most stubborn Brian Wilson is the only songwriter in the band. Fan should listen to this song.
Well, I agree with everything you said. I think this one is a definite classic. And I think on this album, there's two tracks that deserve to be on all of the later box sets or compilations that they put out. And this is one of those tracks. Uh, so yeah, I don't have much to add. But I want to say that I prefer the UK version because I think the US, the original version, is a tad too long, especially
Yep.
at the tag. It just goes on and on and on. Even though I love that part, it's great. It's kind of like some people say that same thing about Funky Pretty, because that tag also is super long. But especially with this
Great
one,
song.
I think that it goes on for way too long. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's a classic.
All right, so the next track on the album is Remember, Walking in the Sand. So this is a cover of the old Shangri-La song from the mid-'60s, which I think is a great song, but it's unfortunately been TikTokified over the past several years, which is a shame. However, I almost wish that this Beach Boys version was the one that went viral on TikTok because I think this shit is hilarious. I will give the band credit for trying to put their own spin on this song and not just copy it note for note like some other artists do. But what they did with this was turn it into one of the most jarring and obnoxious covers I think I've ever heard. First off, the opening with the "Remember, that's right away is a major what the f moment for me. But then it quickly gets even more ridiculous with the freaking like circus organ, and then that really like nasty sounding sax solo. You guys know that I love a good sax part in a song, but this one just sounds really obnoxious to me. Like the like it's just like so over the top and like out of nowhere. That said, though, Carl's vocals on this one are definitely the saving grace of this cover for me. I think that he sings the absolute hell out of the verses, and I think that his vocals are really the only part of this version that kind of come close to capturing the intensity and drama of the original song. So, honestly, I might even consider this one of Carl's best vocals of the '90s. It's just a shame that it was used on one of the band's like goofiest recordings. So, all that said, though, I do not hate this cover, and I think that it does have kind of a cheesy charm to it. But it's far from an essential track for me, and I can definitely see why a lot of people shit on this one. I think that it's a pretty misguided cover at best. So, not the worst thing on Summer in Paradise, but certainly not the best either. So,
So to continue with what Jake was saying, to put it simply, I enjoy listening to this song, but to get into a little bit more detail, my brain can hardly process what the hell is going on when I listen to this song. I kind of feel like it's a musical tilt-a-whirl, if that makes sense. Like you just cannot catch your balance. It feels like you are spinning around, and it almost is like a spiritual successor to Amusement Parks USA with that carnival organ, like Jake mentioned. And then in some moments it feels like hip hop, in some moments it feels like smooth jazz, and so like I literally cannot even find my bearings when I'm listening to it. But with that said, it's got this cool groove to it, and I do think Carl's vocals are really excellent. And I can kind of admire them like experimenting with vocal effects. It's kind of like on the Smiley version of Wonderful and She's Going Bald, how they would like speed their voices up with the tape. It's kind of like they were speeding and pitching up and pitching down their voices on this, which is kind of interesting. You can sort of see them experimenting with some of what Pro Tools had to offer in terms of like audio manipulation. So that's cool. The production is definitely interesting, although very jarring. But yeah, I'll just leave it at a musical equivalent of a tilt-a-whirl.
Yeah, Nate, in terms of those like vocal production tricks that you're talking about, or like the effects in Pro Tools, what is with in the beginning that remember like that really like high
Yeah, that was how I was making that comparison. That
like when I heard
yeah,
that when I heard that again, I forgot about that. And like when I heard that again, I was like, what in the hell is that? Like who is even singing that? Is that Al? Like who?
This might be one of the most batshit insane things I've heard from this band, which is saying something.
and that says a lot.
There is so much going on. You have like random like organs coming in, over the top saxophones, remember backing vocals. I think Carl sings it pretty well. I kind of appreciate like how crazy it is. I don't really see myself coming back to this much, but I kind of appreciate it just for how wild it is. And I think you make a good point, Nate, where like they're experimenting with Pro Tools, they're experimenting, especially with DAWs. So much easier to do that kind of stuff than trying to manipulate tape. So they probably thought, let's just play around and see what happens. So yeah, I kind of appreciate it just for how batshit it is. And I think Carl gives a good vocal, but is really not an essential cover at all.
Yeah. Um,
Remember.
my, no words. It's just I had like perfectly what I wanted to say in my head, and then I quickly just reviewed the section of the song I wanted to review, and I just forgot what I was gonna say. And I think that's a perfect representation of just what the fuck. Um,
Do you like Carl's vocal at least?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Carl, as Matt said, says can sing the phone book.
Yeah.
Uh, I appreciate that they wanted to do something new, and I think this is a perfect encapsulation of the terrible production choices this album has made.
I
This
That's it.
wonder
era gets a lot of flack for them like playing it safe, but to me, this is like the farthest thing from playing
Oh,
it
I
safe.
appreciate them trying. That's what I can appreciate. I just think that it still sounds terrible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Nate, this is another one of those ones where Mike had some comment about it on that radio interview where he was like, "Oh, the arrangement on this one is scorching" or something like that. I'm like, "Yeah, it's scorching, all right."
Oh, it's
I like the sax part too. I do like the sax.
Even that's a bit much for me. It's
I don't
just,
know. I'm a sucker for saxophone
I
solos.
man, but that one just sounds like,
I mean,
oh my.
I think we all are. Because I know Jake, I know you're a big Careless Whisper fan, right? With that sax.
Well, I like that sax. I like the sax on Baker Street. I like the sax on Going On, a lot of the Beach Boys songs. So, but this one, like, it just sounds nasty. I don't know. It's like, I saw somebody described it as like 80s porno sax or something.
It's like Kenny T core sax is what it is.
Yeah. Thomas, thoughts on?
Yeah. Well, it's different. All right. If I didn't know anything about this album, I would guess that this is the only track on the album that had some influence or work done by Brian, which obviously it wasn't the case. And I'm not saying that as a necessarily as a positive, but it's just so strange, and I appreciate that. It's not one of my favorites, but I appreciate that dark. It has this dark, weird vibe, and yeah, it's strange. It's different. It's an all right cover, but yeah, nothing too special. I don't think it's too bad, but it's not great either.
Yeah.
Since you made that point, it does sound a little Sweet Insanity-ish. With the, I
Yeah,
don't know if
kind of.
it's the synths or what it is, but I do see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, it's got that weird. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just really strange.
All right. The next track on Summer in Paradise is Lahaina Aloha, another Mike and Terry Melcher collaboration. So if there's one reason I could give somebody to own Somewhere in Paradise or even just listen to the album, it would be because this track is on it. I think that this is just an amazing song, easily my favorite on the entire album. I think that it has a really strong melody. I love the pretty arrangement with the guitars and the accordion, which I believe the accordion was played by Van Dyke Parks. I know that he plays on a couple of the tracks on here, but I think this is one of them. And I also love Carl's vocal on the chorus. You know I want to, but I can't stay. That's like probably the highlight of the entire record for me. I think Carl just sounds so good singing that. And I also think that those lyrics are especially moving given that Carl would pass away only a few years later. So really moving song. And I've also mentioned this before, but I also really love the guitar solo on this song as well. It's another one of the few moments on the album that gives me almost a melancholic feeling when I hear it. So really like the guitar solo too. So again, if I have one gripe to make, it's that the drums sound crappy again and are too loud. But besides that, I really love the song a lot. And I think that it's one of the best things that the band recorded, not just like after Kokomo, but I would say after 1980. I think it's a really great track, and I'm a huge fan of it. So love Lahaina Aloha.
It is funny to note that you can describe an album by saying, yeah, this is an album the Beach Boys worked on with help from Van Dyke Parks that innovated studio technology. And you could be talking about Smile or you could be talking about Somewhere in Paradise because they do share those specific qualities. So that's interesting to note. But
Yeah.
about this song specifically, I truly think it's a 10 out of 10. I think it's such a moving song. It might make me sound like a sissy, but Carl's vocals in the chorus have genuinely moved me to tears on multiple occasions. I just think the song has a beauty that really tugs at your heartstrings, and the arrangement sounds fresh and modern and almost kind of mystical.
Hmm.
So I love this song. I think it's a no-brainer that this should be on more compilations and more whether it's stuff that focuses on the 90s or even career spanning collections. I think the song is just truly a masterpiece, and I would love to hear what the band could have done with this song, either with a 70s or 80s style arrangement, if this was on something like Sunflower or Holland, or even if this, like, I could also just as easily picture this on That's Why God Made the Radio. Like, a lot of songs on this album sound like they could have only come from the early 90s, but I think this song is just timeless and it could really work in any era, any arrangement, just off the beauty of the composition. And then Carl's vocal just seals the deal and really just elevates it that much more.
Yeah. Yep.
I would love to hear if I could picture a spot on the album to have Brian singing. I think Brian could have blended with Carl really well or nailed some of those high notes. I would love to see what Brian would have added to this song vocally.
Yeah, and I don't think making moving you to tears makes you a sissy, Nate. You know, like Bob Marley once. One good thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain. Anyway, going back to this song, I think this is a very beautiful song. I think it's very well produced. This is another one that I think the production fits very well, like with the steel drums and everything. Carl sings it very beautifully, and there's that nice tinge of melancholy too to this song. You know, kind of like we've had this great time together. You know, it's been so amazing, but I'll be gone, but I'll think about you all the time. Really, really beautiful song. I think another one that would have had some pretty good single potential, and another one that I would say this is a bit of a shame that it's not on streaming, it's not on any compilations. I really think that like this alongside Strange Things Happen would make a really good one-two punch as like a representation from this album on like a compilation record, like a Made in California or something like that. Really, really beautiful song, and I can definitely see why so many people in the fandom feel that this is the best track on the record.
This is this is the other one of the two that has Terry Melcher's name first. So again, I don't really know what that means, but I just think it's a coincidence that like the two biggest, most like fan acclaimed songs from this album is the has that. But yeah, man, this one kind of proves that say what you will about the other material that they still had it. Um, the guitar is again front and center on this one. Carl Wilson gives one of his best vocals from the maybe like the past like 15 years in Beach Boys history. I don't know, man. There's just a lot of emotion in this one.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. By far, in my opinion, the best song on the album, and the other one of those two tracks that I think should be on every compilation that have come out after the release of Summer in Paradise. One of Carl's best lead vocals, in my opinion, or my favorites, and it's got to be one of the most underrated Beach Boys songs, just for the sake of it being on this album, and especially at the end of this album, because so many people overlook it. But yeah, just I love the soaring guitars. They always send shivers down my spine, and that melancholic, heartfelt feeling. And even though I've never been to Hawaii, I think it's set in Hawaii, the story. But if you've been in a long distance relationship, I think you can relate to those lyrics. So yeah, I love the song. I think it's a classic.
It's interesting. Mike even himself said, "Oh, Brian's melancholy and I'm Mr. Positivity." And that's how most of the critics and fans try to like look at the band. But I think this album proves that whatever Mike wants to say, there's a lot of melancholy in Mike's songwriting as well.
Yeah. And I imagine some of that too, as at that point, now he's in his 50s and starting to get older. I think that that side of you kind of comes out a little more, as you get
Yeah,
older,
that's true.
sure, and you reflect on some of your life experiences. So,
That
Yeah,
reminds
Mike could I think write really poetic and melancholic lyrics to like by himself. For example, Big Sur. I think there's I don't know something similar in that song and this one too.
yeah. Okay, the next track on the album is Under the Boardwalk. So this is a cover of the classic Drifter song from 1964, but with a few rewritten lyrics. So like on Remember Walking in the Sand, I think that the best part of this cover is definitely Carl's vocals during the chorus, which I think sound amazing. The Under the Boardwalk, I think he sounds really good on that. But unlike that song, I actually do really like the slick production on this one. I totally understand why that smooth kind of like adult contemporary sound doesn't work for everybody. But in this case, I think that it does suit the song well. And it gives it a very kind of like peaceful and relaxing sound to it, which I like. So if you don't like 80s production, I imagine that you probably won't like this one because this sounds like it could have came straight out of like 1985. But personally, I dig it quite a bit, and I'd probably consider it my favorite of the covers on the album. So I don't think that this one is held in too high regard from fans, but for me, it's definitely a guilty pleasure. I think that Carl's vocal and this like production just really works.
Yeah, I feel similarly about this one as I do the opening track, Hot Fun in the Summertime, in that, it's completely what I would expect and want from a middle-aged version of the Beach Boys.
Mhm.
It's got the summer adjacent imagery and the great harmony vocals and, Mike and Carl trading off. So there's a lot to really like about this recording. And, you know, depending on the day, I might even say that I prefer it to the original version. And the original version's obviously a 50s classic that it was very influential. But there's just something about hearing the Beach Boys with their great voices and their great blend singing this song. So is it something that I'd consider to be life-changing or mind-blowing? No. But is it a great slice of pop that's just very enjoyable and kind of almost like a dessert, just sweet and so I like it.
Yeah. You know what, Nate, I understand. I know some people might be like, oh, that's outrageous that you said that about this version being, you liking it more than the Drifters version. But like, I get it because like there are two different atmospheres that the songs have. Like the original
Yeah.
has that classic kind of like soul or doo-wop kind of sound to it. And this one is just like very like meditative, and like soothing and just like you're laying down outside and like, it's just kind of like flowing over you. So it's two different vibes.
Yeah.
Totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones had a version of it too that was a hit in parts of the world. I think this is a pretty tastefully done cover of it. It's definitely slick AC, but I think it fits for this song because, like, I think you mentioned it, Nate, where it's kind of got like a mellow vibe to it. Carl sings it really well. I like the sax solo, and I think it's a very tastefully done cover, and I think it's definitely the best of the covers on here. Um, Definitely better than Walking in the Sand. I don't know what that was. That was something.
Remember.
Um, yeah, this one's pretty solid. I don't think it's on par with Hot Fun in the Summertime. I think that one's a little bit better. Even though I think the production is actually a little bit worse. Maybe I just think it's a better song all around. Um, I actually think Carl oversins a little bit. That's kind of my hot take with it. For like the only time ever, I think he's almost too good. He's almost too smooth. And for that kind of under the ball, that kind of hook, I need a little bit more human in that voice. Now, I'm not saying I think Mike should have sang it. I think maybe like Al probably could have done a pretty good job with that. Um, yeah, I just think he oversings a little bit. It's a little too much for me, which I think that's the only case of that happening ever in Beach Boys history with the Carl vocal. I do like the nice little slight guitar touches. I think it's a pretty solid cover. I think I prefer Hop On in the Summertime, but this one's probably a close second as to my favorite covers on the album, and it's not close. Because Remember Walking in the Sand is utter garbage. But it's solid, and I think it definitely has its place in the album. And it like we've said, it has a little bit more of a chill, like nighttime vibe, where like the Drifters one's this more like daytime version. So
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's like an evening. It's like the day is
loungy,
laying down. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Nighttime is delight time, right?
oh Jesus. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nothing essential, but it's a good cover. I especially appreciate the vocals, and then I think there's like a drum machine sound. So yeah,
Probably. Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit different. It doesn't have that super obnoxious snare drum thing going on. It's a little bit different production, so I appreciate that. But it's nothing essential. It's all right.
Yeah. I think I'm just kind of a sucker for that slick sound, and there's certain songs. I feel like the songs where that doesn't work for me are songs where like I just don't musically find them interesting in the first place, where like when it's a song that I think is already pretty like musically strong and it's got that production, usually, I'm fine with it, although there is an exception to that coming up. So anyway, so the next track the next track in the album is Somewhere in Paradise, which is credited to Mike, Terry, and Craig Fall. So I have to say, this is the only song on the UK release of the album that I think is far better than the US version. And the main reason for that is that Roger McGuinn is on it. I really love his guitar playing on the UK version, as well as his lead vocals during one of the verses. I think that really adds a lot to the song. Musically, I can't say that I've ever been the biggest fan of this song or found it to be like the most interesting or exciting. But I did really enjoy hearing that Roger McGuinn version again, and it almost makes me wish that he had played on more songs on the record besides this one. So I think it's a decent song. There's kind of a nice message in there with the environment, but also some pretty kind of like ham-fisted lyrics too about the band. So not really a highlight for me, but definitely some nice moments. And that UK version with Roger McGuinn is pretty nice. So
So I'll say the US version to me sounds almost like an unfinished demo,
agreed.
and the song just stays very placid and doesn't take you anywhere. But with that said, the UK version, and even more so the live version that was included on Made in California, I consider to be a classic. And the
Class.
song is not advanced musically. It's not, you know, profound lyrically, but it's just one of those songs that for whatever reason makes me feel good. And it's an uplifting kind of song. And I love, again, on the UK version, that great 12-string guitar work that just great homage to the band's 60s stuff, and just adds a lot of depth to the song. So yeah, I mean, the self-referential lyrics to me make a little more sense when you take into account the fact that this they were celebrating their 30th anniversary around this time, doing TV specials and releasing that Good Vibrations box set. And, so celebrating their legacy was definitely something that was top of mind for them at this time. But I really enjoy this song, and I started to enjoy it even more when I heard it performed live in 2017. And they played it, at a faster tempo with a little more passion than you hear on the studio versions. So I really like this song. And to be honest, the whole ecological theme, it's positive, and I can commend that they're trying to sing about something positive and to make some positive change. But what I enjoy about the song is mostly just the harmonies and the uplifting kind of vibe.
So for me, I definitely think that this version on the US album does sound unfinished. Its mix is kind of bad, doesn't really go anywhere. Definitely better in the UK mix and the version on the box set. Um, so I know Riley had mentioned earlier in the episode that there, like, sometimes he doesn't really like the self-referential stuff. This for me is too much on the I don't really care for it. Like, we're having fun, fun, fun as America's band, rocking with Rhonda and Barbara Ann. I don't really care for that too much. And the I get what they're trying to do with the environmental stuff, but it's a bit on the nose for me. So it's to me, it's almost like you kind of take like the worst aspects lyrically of California Calling and the worst aspects of Don't Go Near the Water and dial it up to 11 and smush it together and you get this song. So I'm really not the biggest fan of this song. Sorry, Nate.
Riley.
Yeah, sonically, I'm a big fan of it. I don't think the composition itself is anything nuts, but I actually do like the production on this one. I think the drums maybe could be real drums, and then it would be a great backing track. I'm a sucker for Roger McGuinn. You guys probably know I'm a pretty big Birds fan. I love jangle guitar, 12-string guitar. So I think it sounds great musically. Lyrically, it's a bit of a letdown. I think Mike, for better or for worse, has a pretty good way with words, and he probably could have conveyed the message a bit better um, without a lot of the self-reference. And even the stuff talking about the environment, I think he could have done a lot better because he has done a lot better before in the past, which is a little bit of a letdown because I truly do believe that Mike did believe in this message of like helping the environment. I mean, say what you will about the guy and like a lot of his beliefs and a lot of the things he's done, but I do think this is one thing he did deeply care about. So a little bit of a letdown lyrically, but performance-wise and sonically, I am a fan. So I'm not gonna turn it off because I think it's Jake and I are pretty similar in the fact that like if their song has a good melody and a good like backing track, we'll probably still return to it. So I do like it. I just kind of wish he conveyed and portrayed the message a little bit better instead of making, remember when we did Barbara Ann? That was a great song.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Uh,
agree with that. I think it has a good message, but it's too on the nose. It's too on the nose, and it's a little too wink, wink, nudge, nudge, self-referential like that, which you can only get away with that so much, in my opinion.
yeah. We needed a little more toothpaste and soap to make the oceans a bubble bath.
That's
Yeah, I
yeah,
was gonna say when Mike writes love songs, it's what good is the dawn that grows in today, the sunset at night, and then when he writes ecology songs, he's like, oh yeah, toothpaste and bubbles, and this is what the song is about, and they're so straightforward.
yeah. I feel like it works on Don't Go Near the Water though, because like the rest of it builds up well, and like he's almost like rapping that part, so like he can kind of almost get away with just
So
spewing.
you're saying
Oh,
Mike should have made a rap about ecology instead of Summer of Love.
I would take it if you had a good flow on it. That's the biggest problem is the flow is bad. If he was rapping it like Eminem, sure, he can get away with whatever the hell he wants to rap. I don't care.
Mike loved rap album.
Yeah, well, musically, it's a decent rocker. I don't like the lyrics at all. Agree with everything you said. But yeah, I guess the UK version is a little bit better, but I'm not a big fan of either one of those studio versions. The Made in California release, the live version, just kicks ass. It's great. So, I come back to that quite often. Otherwise, I'm not a big fan of this song.
All right. So I believe that was the final track in the album, right, guys? So I think we can.
Yeah, let's talk about Sweet Insanity and Smart Girls.
Goodbye now.
Oh,
I
where
can.
are we, guys? We're missing one. We're missing.
Fortunately, yeah, I know, Matt. So
Touch on it. I know. I just want to say one thing too about this song. This is the only song that was not produced by Terry Melcher. It was produced by Gary Griffin and Larry Cardola. And I was
You
going to
can
ask,
fucking tell.
who is Lanny Cardola? Do you know who that is?
I mean, I know who Gary Griffin is.
I
'Cause he
know
was,
Gary Griffin, but I just didn't know if you knew who Lanny Cardola is.
I don't know.
Don't know either. Sorry, Lanny.
So, as we all know, this was originally written by Dennis and Greg Jacobson. It first appeared on Sunflower. But this version is unfortunately sung by John Stamos. So I think you guys all kind of know my thoughts on this re-recording, so I'll try to keep it brief. The original version of Forever is one of my favorite songs in the Beach Boys catalog and one of my favorite songs of all time. And I'd also probably consider it Dennis's greatest song that he did with the band. So the fact that it was re-recorded as an overblown power ballad with a guitar solo and freaking John Stamos singing it, I think it's pretty appalling. I will say that I find the UK mix of this song to be a bit more tolerable than the US version, mostly because they tone down the guitars quite a bit and they're using mostly keyboard instead. So I do prefer that. Still, though, I have to listen to Stamos's fake, like, emotive singing, which I really hate. And I also hate that this was even included on the album in the first place. I understand that they were probably hoping that it would help sell the record, with the Stamos Full House connection. But clearly that didn't work because this album didn't even chart. So I do not like this recording at all, and I'd still consider it my least favorite song to appear on a Beach Boys studio album. I do understand the argument that the original is strong enough to take a beating, like Matt has said before. But for me, this cover just has no heart or soul to it, and it really just comes off as less of a tribute to Dennis and more of a parody to me. So musically, it may not be the worst thing ever, but personally, I just can't get past what this represents, and I really hate that Stamos is singing on this. I really wish Carl had just sang it or one of the other Beach Boys. It's just he's trying to like sound emotive, and it just sounds so just fake to me. And I don't know. Again, not the worst thing I've ever heard. If the original song didn't exist, I'd probably just be like, okay, it's a whatever. It's an okay power ballad, whatever. But like knowing the original and like the fact that like Dennis was so proud of that song and everything, I just got a problem with it. So not a fan.
So at the risk of forever being, no pun intended, at the risk of forever being clowned and laughed at and made fun of, I will still just be myself and wear my heart on my sleeve and say that I really adore this song and this version of the song. And I think if one is able to write a truly transcendent, eternal song, nothing or no one can ruin it. And I think Dennis was one of those people that could truly write a song that will live on forever. Like, not to use that pun again, but Dennis's songwriting, particularly in the case of this song, is so angelic that even a questionable production job still won't ruin his incredible composition. And to me, it's truly inevitable that John Stamos was going to end up singing and playing on Beach Boys records. He had been already playing with them for almost a decade at this point, to be exact, 7 or 8 years. So, it's not like he was a brand new guy in town. And what I also think is redeeming about the cover is it's not like you had some fat cat in a suit telling the band, oh, you should record this song with John Stamos and we think it'll sell a lot. And it wasn't some contrived thing. It was that Dennis had been a hero to Stamos ever since the guy was a little kid. And John Stamos always looked up to Dennis with all of his heart. And, Dennis made John want to play the drums and make music himself. And John was a huge advocate for trying to get this song out there more. So it was his idea to include it on Full House. It was his idea to record the track because he cared about it so much. And Dennis made such an impact on his life that he wanted to help the song become more well known. And if that was his goal, I think he definitely succeeded at that because, you can roll your eyes at this recording all you want. And like, if you guys all dislike it, you have every right to dislike it. But I think we can all agree that there's a ton of people in our generation who know this song because of John. And I think that would even make Dennis happy. Like John's work of singing this song on TV and on the album helped this song reach a far wider audience. And there's a lot of people who have this song sung or played at their wedding. And it might even be because of them hearing it on Full House and not them hearing it from Sunflower. But nonetheless, that's still giving the song the attention and the ears that it deserves. So, I'll even say it's totally cliche, but I sang this song to my wife at my wedding. And, as much as I love Dennis, that was partially due to the whole bit of Uncle Jesse singing it on the show and with the wedding. So that's the whole context of why I think the song is redeeming. But I'll also just say, I think the production is very cool, in my humble opinion. This is another example on the album where I think the larger than life drums and the synths and all the power ballad stuff actually kind of works. I think the production is very dynamic, and at some moments it's very huge, and at some moments it's very pulled back. The last thing I'll say, two more things I'll say, and then you guys can say your opinion, is I think Carl's vocal cameo on this song sends shivers down my spine and totally gets me choked up. With that just couple 10 seconds where Carl comes in and has his little lead moment, it is just so gorgeous. And I can feel Carl's love for Dennis when I hear Carl sing that line. And the other final thought I have on this song is I am so thrilled that they recorded it and that I'll even say I'm happy that it became somewhat associated with John Stamos, mainly for the reason that it's included in so many concert set lists due to that fact. And I think if it wasn't a, minor hit with Stamos on TV, that it's very doubtful that Mike would include this in a good half of the set lists per year. But, for me, I consider it truly a privilege and an honor to have heard this song performed live and it gave me a feeling of connection to Dennis. So for that reason, I'm so happy that this version exists. And I'm happy that the song has gotten more attention than it ever got in the 70s or while Dennis was alive, unfortunately. But I have no doubt that Dennis is somewhere, above us, smiling down and happy at the fact that his song has gotten so much more recognition since his passing.
So I don't viscerally hate this cover like some other people do, but here's my opinion on it. So yes, I like Jake said, I do think it's a good enough song it can take a beating. And I did grow up listening to a lot of those like early 90s power ballads. Those are some of my earliest musical education. Having said that, and listening to this again, I do kind of see what you're saying, Jake. The way he delivers the vocal, it is definitely like he's almost trying to force the emotion. I heard that now more than I had in the past. I do really like Carl's backing vocals and everything. I like that. I actually kind of wish they had done this similar to how it was performed on Full House when the wedding episode with Uncle Jesse and Aunt Becky, where he's just like playing the piano as like the choir. I don't think it needed all that like garnishment like that you're hearing on this version. But yes, I do think it is great that the song came to bigger attention because of his association with it. I don't really care for the music video that they made Full House related with this, like with the babies and stuff. It's very weird if you've never seen it. And I'm also not really the biggest fan of Full House anymore, like I was when I was a kid, because I think it's an unbearably cheesy show. Like it like could like rot your teeth. It's so sugary sweet. But yeah, I think it's a fine cover. I don't think it's the worst thing on the album. I don't think it's the worst thing they ever recorded in their catalog. But I kind of can see now more, Jake, with what you're saying with the faux emotion. I'm hearing it more now. I guess I've just gotten too much like exposure therapy to Alex Warren and all that crap, so like I'm hearing it more now.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm more with Jake on this one, and I do want to give credit to Stamos for better or for worse. I he is like still is a massive Brian Wilson and Beach Boy and especially Dennis Wilson fan. I don't think that his love for the song was just him wanting to take the reins of it. Like I don't think that was his intention. He does come across as a very genuine Beach Boys fan. I don't know if he's exactly the most genuine person, but he does come across as a genuine Beach Boys fan. And definitely a Dennis Wilson and even Brian Wilson fan. So I do want to give him credit for that. And I do think his goal with like the whole Full House and whatever the hell that other TV show was to give like a spotlight to the band. Even though he was probably benefiting from like being able to play as like a drummer in some of their shows and him living his dream of being a Beach Boy was kind of like a side effect for him. He did I do think he still want to give spotlight to the band. And Nate did make a great point that forever it was there's no way in hell Mike would have included it in any modern set list if it wasn't for Stamos. So I kind of wish they would still market it as a Dennis song than
Hmm.
just here's John doing Full House again for the 100th time.
Hmm.
But it is in the modern spotlight. I just kind of wish they'd also make it, hey, here's that song Dennis did. This is Dennis's song. Instead of just playing pictures in the back, like no casual fan's gonna know that.
They've
Uh,
also used it as a tribute to Bob Saget, which I was not crazy about either. And nothing against Bob Saget, I just don't really get the association other than Full House.
yeah, it's more or less them doing Full House than Dennis, which sucks. The
It's
casuals,
definitely fan service to the fans who who discovered them through Full House, the way that they do it now. I'll give you guys that. They
Yeah.
used to do it with pictures of Dennis, and then ever since Bob Saget died, it's like a Saget tribute. And I think originally the Saget thing was probably, I assume, only supposed to be for like one night. But I do not doubt that with the several times that the band was on Full House, plus all the years afterwards, that as far as I know, Saget did become quite friendly with the band, and a lot of the cast on Full House became like genuine real life friends with some of the band members. So ultimately, it doesn't come across as 100% contrived to me, but it's definitely a fan service to, oh, you guys remember seeing us on Full House? You're one of those fans? Okay, here you go. Here's Full
Yeah.
House.
Yeah, and like I said, like by all accounts, Bob Saget was a lovely man, so I have no issue with it, like doing a tribute to him. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way because I feel like we're losing the Dennis connection. That's my issue with it.
That's
Yeah.
fair. Totally
That,
fair.
that's exactly, you guys pretty much summed up where I sit with it. Like, okay, I'm glad people know this song that was written by Dennis. I'm sure like, Dennis would appreciate that. But again, I think a lot of these people, they know that version of it. They don't, a lot of people might even think Stamos wrote the damn thing. They don't even know, like, oh, the Beach Boys drummer, you want to hear that version? Like, so I don't know. I think that's my gripe with it. I do think it's losing kind of the Dennis connection. Like when we saw him a couple of years ago and we were at that concert, and I don't even think they mentioned it, before he played it. So I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, I think that I do appreciate Stamos for bringing light to the song, but it has kind of become, whether intentionally or unintentionally, his song more than Dennis's. Uh, but he is a real fan, and I do want to give him credit for that. He knows the band's history. That guy is, whether you probably believe it or not, maybe not as big a super fan as us, but he is a super fan. But this version sucks. It's it takes away like the subtle beauty of like Dennis's. And it's like explaining a joke to somebody. Like,
That's why I said it feels like a parody to me.
right, if you have to explain the joke, it's not funny anymore. And if you have to explain the song, and if you have to like bring out qualities of the song that don't need to be brought out, it's taking away all its charm. So like it would be like taking freaking God only knows and like making it a punk song. It just takes away all like the life of it. And even if Dennis was still around today and John Stamos did the song, like I would still probably hold this opinion that it just sucks. It just does. Like it's not because Dennis passed, so now we have to feel sentimental. It's just no, this just sucks.
I think
Um,
Dennis would try to beat him up if he tried to do
yeah, I think Dennis would kick the shit out of him. But and it sucks because I mean, with a guy like Stamos in like the '90s before kind of became this like huge prick, um, like it's sorry. I mean, I feel like he kind of has that like smugness to him a little bit. I don't doubt that he's done good things, but he has a smug attitude. Like if he did exactly what he did in the wedding episode, where you have him just at the piano doing it, I think the worst case scenario would just be like inoffensive. It'd be like, oh, this is a nice tribute from a super fan who's kind of made us a little bit popular in recent years. He's sat down on piano and played forever. That would be cool. But no, he just explained the joke and it's just shit. So I'm not a fan of it. It gets worse every listen. Like I want to try and like it because I am a fan of Full House, but no, it's just shit, man. It's just shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing against Stamos, but Forever is one of my favorite songs, not only by the Beach Boys, but in general. So anyway, I'll just stay with the positives, and I agree with Nate that end part, that acoustic, minimalistic part with Carl is just heavenly. It's so emotional. It's just sad that it only lasts for like 5 seconds,
Yeah.
but that's super beautiful little part of this version, and I love that section. But it's yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I think because I kind of like getting at what, you said it's one of your favorite Dennis songs. It's also, or one of your favorite songs. It's one of my favorite songs too. Like, if we got to get a Stamos cover on the album, then I'd rather he just do like, I don't know, like a beach, like, I don't know. something like Help Me Rhonda or one of the upbeat songs everybody knows could be like, okay, whatever. But like, I don't know, like when it's a song like Forever, which is already kind of a more, that like, okay, yeah, the song is more popular now because of Full House, because people know that version. But like, the original recording is kind of something that like it feels personal to fans because it's not a super popular song. Kind of in the same way, like Please Let Me Wonder feels personal maybe to some people more than something like a Don't Worry Baby because it's a less popular song. I think like, man, my issue is like, this was the song that they chose to do this to. Like, I wish they picked something a little more obvious and not a song that like I feel like I legitimately have like a connection with. I don't know. I think that's kind
Hey,
of where,
Stamos did a version of Be True to Your School on Full House, so like do that.
yeah, whatever. I could care less. I'd be like, okay, great. But yeah. All right, so now before we wrap up this episode, we did want to discuss a few extra tracks that were recorded around this time, specifically a couple of tracks that Brian and Andy Paley worked on together. So Riley, do you kind of want to lead us through that?
Yes. Brian and Andy Paley kind of started their partnership around the time of Brian Wilson's self-titled. They worked on a couple of songs together for that album, and they kind of blossomed into a almost full-time partnership. This partnership did continue to like the mid to late, mostly mid 90s. You see some of their tracks that also came around the time was I don't want to say infamous, but just not so famous S- Sweet Insanity, um, which was ultimately rejected by Sire Records as a follow-up to Brian Wilson 88 for various reasons, but mostly including terrible lyrics from Eugene Landy, who had almost complete creative control over Brian, and Smart Girls. So I don't know where we want to start because there is some stuff from like the mid 90s that we could talk about. I think though if we just kind of got past Summer in Paradise, we do got to talk about Smart Girls first.
Yeah, do Smart Girl.
Which lyrics by Landy, but rapped by Brian. And in a very similar way to Summer of Love, this one has some charm to it. Like I know the lyrics are by Landy, but Brian just seems like so happy, like rapping. He's like, "My name is Brian, I'm the man," and it's got charm, but like I'm never coming back to this. I mean, like it's just if I am, it's for like a laugh. It's not for this is genuinely great. Um,
Yeah.
has charm, but it oh my God.
It has charm. It's funny. It was clearly made as a joke. And fortunately, there was someone at the record label that knew that and didn't put it out because this could have very easily damaged his reputation as a solo artist if this had actually come out. There have been cases in the past, and I can say examples where like labels just put out whatever the artist gave them, they were made as a joke, and it ruined their credibility. So thank God whoever was in charge of Sire
It
Records.
says that Brian now has sole writing credit. So did Brian want to make a rap album in 1990?
Well, Brian, it's just that because there was an interview that Brian said like we just kind of did this like for fun. We were just having
Yeah,
fun.
I mean this is obviously a joke, and I knowing that I can totally get behind it. But
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just glad that, like I said, it never really got out there because, like I said, there have been cases in the past where songs were sent into the label as a joke, and the label actually used them, and it like kind of destroyed like an artist's credibility. Or some
you think
cases,
this seriously would have ruined Brian's credibility?
maybe not. I think people just would have thought it was ridiculous. I mean, I know Van Morrison to get out of his label, his deal with Bang Records, really like went to the studio with an out-of-tune guitar, recorded a bunch of crap about like sandwiches and shit just to get out of it, and they just couldn't use it. So that's how he was able to get out of that label. And then of course he gave us Astro Week. So who knows?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with Riley and you on this, Matt. Like, there's a charm to it, I hate how catchy the stupid chorus is. Like the sexy ladies with high IQs. Like, I hate how catchy it is. But like, yeah, obviously, it does kind of sound like they were just messing around. Like a lot of the samples that are on here are like really lazily, like or sloppily edited in. Like it kind of just sounds like crap. Like the way that they inserted like God Only Knows and some of those other songs at the end. But yeah, I think there's kind of a balance for me where I like the charm of it. Like it is kind of funny hearing Brian rap, and like Riley said, like he does sound like he's kind of having a good time. But just knowing he was with Landy and like, Landy was kind of pulling the strings at that time, like I just kind of get an icky feeling from it too. So it's kind of a balance for me. Like I like Riley, I'm not like coming back to this by itself, like if I hear it somewhere, I'll laugh. But like I think, yeah, just the Landy connection makes it a little uncomfortable for me. But it is pretty, the lyrics are pretty funny and stupid. And, I like sexy ladies with high IQs too. So,
Yeah, shit, man. He's got me there.
yeah.
So yeah, with this one, I'll say like to me, there's something very like consciously self-deprecating with Summer of Love because
Hmm.
he's making a whole song out of a pun about his last name, and it's like all very like tongue in cheek. But what I don't love about Smart Girls is I'm sure we've all been in the situation before, whether you're in school or at a party or something, and like there's a group of kids kind of making fun of or laughing at one of the kids instead of laughing with them, but like laughing at them, kind of like making someone do something embarrassing and they don't maybe even realize how
Yeah.
embarrassing it is. I feel like we've all been in those scenarios as kids before. And that's definitely the vibe I get from Smart Girls. Like whether it was Landy or whoever was in the studio, kind of almost more so laughing at Brian than laughing with him. And just to take someone that by all accounts was very like mentally unwell at the time with such a legacy. Like think about how careful Melinda and Brian's current team has been for all these years with Brian's like legacy and with like presenting Brian in the most respectful way possible. And to me, this just like totally feels like the opposite. And hell, for all I know, this was Brian's idea and he was having a ball. But there's something about it, like Jake said, it just makes me feel a little icky,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I'd sum it up.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like listening to that like Lauryn Hill record where she was very mentally unwell and you can tell.
Yeah. Thomas, any thoughts on Smart Girls?
Yeah, I get what Nate said, kind of agree with that, but I still find it funny. I think the usage of those samples is kind of innovative in some ways, or at least in some parts. But yeah, it's a fun track. It's not super artistic or anything like that, but I enjoy it.
Is it the time that you all want me to say that it reminds us of Smile because of
Yeah.
mashing up other songs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And Smart Girls, like I almost make a connection to Smile because Riley, any other songs you want to talk about? Brian, Andy Paley?
Yeah, so I mean, we could talk about now while we're on the topic a little bit of the Sweet Insanity stuff. I mean, a lot of the lyrics are Eugene Landy, so like
Yeah.
you don't really want to touch it. And I think honestly his biggest crime with the record was absolutely nuking Let's Go to Heaven in My Car to make it a completely different song. Um, it's called Water Builds Up, and it's
Oh yeah.
absolute dog shit. Like, how can you do that to Let's Go to Heaven in My Car? Like, Landy's done a lot of fucked up shit, but come on, man, that might take the cake with me. Not actually. Terrible guy. I don't know. I don't think there's just a lot really interesting besides one particular song, which I'm pretty confident that Brian wrote by himself, called Don't Let Her Know She's an Angel.
Yep.
And I like this version in particular. I know there's the Get In and Over My Head version, which is pretty cool too. And this song's kind of gone through a lot of iterations. But that like smooth, slick, like loungy style council, like Paul Weller kind of production in this one absolutely makes it for me. And I think it's a earworm. I know there's compositionally it's mostly just first chorus, but I think there's a lot of charm to it. And it's one that I've been coming back to a lot lately. Especially this like slick synthy production version. Besides that, I gotta be honest, Sweet Insanity is very uninteresting besides that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you there. In terms of "Don't Let Her Know She's an Angel," though, I love that song. I've actually known it for quite a while because I first heard, I think it's Brian's like piano demo version of it that he did. I heard that on YouTube a few years ago, and I thought that was a really moving recording. I actually still come back to that one. I think it's a very haunting kind of song. And then I discovered the Sweet Insanity version a little bit later on with the kind of like slick production that Riley's talking about. And I really like both versions. I think that the song is like musically pretty strong. I think it has a really good melody. And honestly, I'd rank it up there pretty high with like some of my other favorite Brian solo tracks. So really nice song, and I think that there's like some heart to it, so I really do like that one a lot. But like Riley said, like I'm not like super familiar with the other Sweet Insanity stuff, but like I have heard most of it, and like yeah, no, doesn't do much for me. So
For me, I'd say Sweet Insanity epitomizes both some of my favorite aspects of Brian's solo career and some of my least favorite aspects of Brian's solo career. And what I mean by that is at its best moments, I feel like it's Brian being very vulnerable and very quirky. And as a solo artist, he no longer has to fit this rigid box of what the Beach Boys are and with the summer and beach and school. As a solo artist, he could express whatever he wanted to express and be very musically adventurous. So at times, I feel like his solo career or this album specifically have moments of total sheer brilliance, like, Don't Let Her Know She's an Angel. And likewise, it also has moments where I just hear too many cooks in the kitchen. I hear other musicians making Brian Wilson records, so to speak, where you just really get the sense when you're listening to it that this was something most likely created by outsiders with Brian's name kind of stamped on it. So yeah, kind of like his solo career overall, and this album specifically, it just really ranges from stuff that I consider total gold, essential Brian Wilson tracks to songs that just yeah, feel like dissections and pastiches on like Brian's most brilliant work. So it's a mixed bag. I do think as a fan, I would like to have it released in its original form, but as someone who is trying to be objective, I think it would have been more catastrophic to his career than beneficial for it to come out. I think say what you will about Imagination, about it being smooth or adult contemporary, but Imagination was very in line with the whole Brian Wilson brand and legacy. And to me, the Sweet Insanity is just very jolting and jarring and doesn't have a strong identity of its own. You can definitely hear Brian still figuring out what Brian Wilson as a solo artist was going to be. And I think Imagination is where they sort of fell into that formula. I
yeah,
will say too, Sweet Insanity is such a fucking inappropriate and cynical title for a Brian Wilson album.
yeah,
Like I totally feel that that was a Landy title, and it's just so offensive and inappropriate given what Brian was going through and his battles with mental illness. Like, okay, adult child, wink, wink, we get it. Brian's kind of childish, but to make a pun on insanity with a guy that has schizophrenic like afflictions
yeah,
is just so off-putting and frankly downright offensive.
yeah. Riley, did you want to talk about Soul Search?
Yeah, so they're again back to the Brian and Andy Paley stuff. They kind of had a once Brian and Landy split, they kind of started working together again. And there was kind of a plan in the mid 90s,
95.
95, 96 to release another like almost Beach Boys reunion album almost, with Brian kind of back into the mix. Carl ended up scrapping it along the way. You got a couple of tracks with Brian and Andy Paley. You have their whole like session tape that we can also talk about, I'm sure. But the two biggest ones was You're Still a Mystery and Soul Searching. And we talked about Soul Searching when we did our Red, White, and Blue album draft. This one's a banger. It's kind of a return to form, and I think it, like you said, Nate, this is Brian finding his solo sound because you do hear this a little bit on like you kind of similar to production to that Lucky Old Sun, um,
Hmm.
classic Brian Wilson Wall of Sound production, and Carl gives that hell of a vocal on it. It's interesting what could have happened as like a mid '90s almost. It's funny to say um like more raw record of its like stripped back compared to like the years and years of synths and like the digital stuff because it's not exactly like stripped back but like compared to that stuff it is. But
Live instruments, less effects, for sure.
Soul Searching's a fucking banger. You're Still a Mystery is pretty cool. As for like the other stuff they did, it's all right. I know they have a slightly American music was done for Long Promise Road.
Banger.
I did like their version of This Could Be the Night that they did, also banger. But that unfortunately, despite Paley kind of being related to that Nielsen thing, it wasn't necessarily a Brian Paley thing, but it was still pretty cool. But they definitely had some potential. I don't think it's like a classic Brian Wilson like collaboration like we got with like Gary Usher, and Mike and some of those guys. Definitely, if you're like tier list this would be like B tier compared to like Brian and Tony Asher S tier and like Brian and Gary Usher A tier and kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I really love Soul Searching. I think it's a great song, great vocal from Carl. Yeah, it really does make you wonder, like, what would we got a Beach Boys album that sounded, like that song, like that would be a really damn good album, if the songs were all of that quality. Yeah, in terms of the other stuff I've heard, I'm not like particularly blown away by it. I will say the song, Riley, isn't the song getting in over my head? Brian and Andy Paley.
I think so. Yeah, you a lot of those songs on that record actually you do have the Brian and Paley stuff.
Yeah,
I'm double checking right. I actually pulled it up in the background. I have the Wikipedia page open.
I do really like getting in over my head. I think
Yeah,
that's
that's like the 2004 record. You have the Soul Searching actually made that. Desert Drive. That's all right, but it's just kind of classic Brian Wilson rocker. Saturday Morning in the City.
that's
Um,
a Saturday morning in the city. I think I've heard that one.
yeah, I don't think it's necessarily like classic. This is the greatest thing ever, but it's all right. It's good stuff. Brian was in his 50s, 60s, like by the time this stuff was like released. So
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
getting
I
over my head also, sorry to cut you off, Jake, but getting it over my head was kind of overshadowed because it came out the same year as Brian Wilson Presents Smile, and that was the one that like everyone lost their shit over. I'm a big fan of Soul Search, and I think that's a great song, and Carl sings it so well. I don't know why he like kind of scrapped all this. I think it's a bit of a shame because like if they could have kept up the quality with stuff like that, that album I think could have done pretty decently. While we're on the subject of Annie Paley, a lot of the stuff he did for SpongeBob is very
yes, that's the best stuff.
Beach Boys and Brian Wilson influenced. You can definitely hear a lot of that. I know he did like a lot of stuff on because I got the SpongeBob SquarePants movie soundtrack on vinyl for Record Store Day, and I know like he did Best Day
Funky
Ever and
bitch.
songs on there.
well, and then Ripped Pants has the Be True to Your School opening.
Believe it or not, I don't think he actually touched Rip Pants.
Ah,
I don't think he did that song, which kind of surprised me because I could have sworn it was him. Yeah, no, this was written by Peter Strauss and Paul Tibbett. I just know that Best Day Ever has a lot of it sounds kind of like Beach Boys-esque with the harmonies and stuff. And that one is definitely Andy Paley. He wrote that with Tom Kenny, who does the voice of SpongeBob.
I prefer Ripped Pants to Be True to Your School.
Rip Pants is great, but
Pants,
unfortunately no
fucking
Paley
classic.
association there.
Rip Pants is a proper fucking classic, dude.
I love Rip Pants. It's
And no one ever.
Best
but yeah.
song
So
to play at a
what
summer
I
camp.
what I could say about the Paley era stuff is a lot of Brian's co-writers, I feel like they try to use their co-writing with Brian as a vehicle to make the kind of stuff they want to make. Like I think Van Dyke Parks is one example of that. Like all the songs that Brian wrote with Van Dyke Parks are immediately identifiable as, oh, this is something that Van Dyke wrote because they sound so much like Van Dyke. I'd say the same thing about Joe Thomas. Like I think Van Dyke tried to make Brian more avant-garde, and on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have someone like Joe Thomas that was always pushing Brian to be more AC, more radio friendly. And what I really appreciate about Andy Paley is I feel none of that. I don't feel like he's trying to push Brian this way. I don't feel like he's trying to push Brian this way. I think he was just a great co-producer and a great co-writer to allow Brian to be Brian. So you've got the kind of patriotic Americana kind of themes that come in with slightly American music, and then you have kind of old rockers with a hint of surf with like I'm Broke and with the fuzz bass going on, and Proud Mary, which kind of is along the lines of 15 Big Ones with those oldies covers. So it doesn't seem to me like Paley was trying to push Brian to be this avant-garde studio maestro. Doesn't seem like he was trying to push Brian into being this radio pop touring guy. It just seems like he was really comfortable with Brian making music that was just for the sake of enjoyment and and artistic reward. So to me, this is some of Brian's quirkiest, most personal kind of music, and for that reason, I really like it. My buddy, who's a big Beach Boys fan, he and I always joke about the Paley stuff that it just sounds like two dads making music in their basement. Like it has this very homegrown kind of charm to it, and it doesn't sound like a big budget record label spending on all the best studio cats and engineers. It just sounds like two guys that were students of rock and roll, just making kind of dad like tunes just for their own enjoyment. And I think they're very charming and at times even brilliant.
Any additional thoughts you guys wanted to share before we wrap up here?
Um, the 90s in general. Um, yeah, I don't think I want to touch the country one.
I
Yeah.
might have to do that episode by myself.
Yeah, Nate's gonna just do it alone.
I'll just sit here by myself ranting away
Nate-
about Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, we're gonna have 4 boxes for Nate. We'll have like AI Nate.
Yeah.
Yeah. The echo chamber of Nate. Thomas, anything else you wanted to add, or?
Nothing really. I enjoyed the discussion, and it was really fun to chat with you guys. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate that.
Great having you on. Thanks for getting up so early to join us. We
What
really
time is it over there right now?
7:30 a.m.
So we started at like 5:30 for you, huh?
Yeah, you got
Yeah,
up
like,
around
yeah.
4:30. Yeah.
I guess the last thing I would want to say to sum up my feelings is just like all of us, every single one of us at some point in this episode mentioned that we feel like this album or this era has been treated unfairly. And maybe we feel that to different degrees, but that's something that we all share in terms of how we feel. And so I'm really glad that almost any video you look up on the internet about Somewhere in Paradise or about the Beach Boys in the 90s, you'll just hear people bitching and talking shit and almost being, to a certain extent, like rude. So I'm just really proud and stoked about the fact that we spent like almost what 3+ hours talking about this album and this
Shit,
era.
we did,
And
didn't we?
I'm glad that in a sea of negativity about this album that we were able to bring some positivity to the discussion.
Yeah, and I was actually trying to be mindful because I know I kind of had been hard on this album in the past, but honestly, like listening to it again, like yeah, truthfully, I think there's some good stuff that some production choices were not great. And again, I really think, honest to God, it's that Summer of Love that kind of people see that
Yeah.
the whole thing off.
Yeah. Yeah, Nate, you'll appreciate this reference. But normally, when people discuss this album, it's a sad, sad summer, but we gave it a summer of love. So
A fucking man.
Not a cruel summer though, right?
yeah, shut up, Matt.
Matt, that's the second time you fucked up tonight, man.
All right, we will wrap it up there. So thank you everybody for listening to this 54th episode of Good Timin'. I hope you all enjoyed the show. I had a really great time discussing Summer in Paradise with you guys, and I hope that our discussion convinces some of you listening to give the album another chance sometime. So, as always, if you like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the Good Timin' podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.